Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Hey, my name is King, or as some of you might know me better, Israel. I've gotten around, but hopefully you recognize me from my own channel, King Tannic. There's a new show coming to the Burnettwork that I think is pretty exciting. Welcome to the Otaku Experience, hosted by yours truly. This is going to be a weekly series where we dive into the news and the world of anime, manga, and whatever the heck else Japan has to offer us. The show will be pre-recorded and premiere on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time or 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Burnettwork YouTube channel.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
This episode of Robservations is sponsored by The John Campea Show. Find The John Campea Show on YouTube or the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, still as yet undefined, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am, of course, robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode 843. It's been a big weekend at the box office. Super Mario Brothers, to be fair, John Campea did say that he thought that Super Mario Brothers might be the highest grossing movie of 2023. And after the shocking turn of events, if you call them shocking, I don't know how shocking they are, but after the turn of events at the box office, the worldwide box office, John might be right. And you know what? I'm not going to be one to say he was wrong, because, my God, check it out. So on Deadline today, at around noon on this Easter Sunday, our friend Anthony D'Alessandro, who I basically rip off his work every Sunday on Let's Get Physical Media, wrote an article, Why the Animated Super Mario Brothers Shattered Box Office Records and the 1993 Super Mario Brothers Failed. While streamers typically get by on thrifty marketing budgets, pushing content largely on their menus, most motion picture studios like Universal still have all the superpowers in the world to blast a movie out of cannon. But here's something to keep in mind as we detail Universal's promo playbook below in propelling Illumination Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. To several opening records. 377 million worldwide, 204.6 million 3-day for an animated feature. IP and marketing machine alone don't propel a movie to great box office heights. The movie also needs to be great. As subjective and simple-minded as that sounds, when it comes to the feature take of the ever-popular video game Super Mario Brothers, or I would say franchise, there's many different Super Mario games. I mean, I remember meeting Mario for the very first time when I was playing Donkey Kong in arcades, when I was a young whippersnapper. When it comes to the feature take of the ever-popular video game Super Mario Bros., it meant staying faithful to the source material itself, the game. The games. And that's exactly what Illumination and filmmakers Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelenic did in this second big screen go-round of the Nintendo game. That all started by teaming with the original Super Mario Bros. Game architect Shigeru Miyamoto, who was a hands-on producer on the animated film. Gosh, they went and got the guy who created the IP in the first place. What an amazing, what an insightful thing to do. I would think that would be par for the course. But you know what? It's great that they did it. He's an asset the first 1993 live-action feature adaptation did not have, with the Disney Hollywood Pictures distributed title ultimately finalizing a disastrous $40 million worldwide gross off a near $50 million production cost. The best movie marketing machines in town, and Universal has one of them, don't work without a film that connects with audiences, and studios can decipher that appeal well in advance. Super Mario Bros. Easily notched an A cinema score and an 88 post-track exits with 75% definite recommend, as opposed to the 1993 film's B+ and 29% Rotten Tomatoes audience score. The Super Mario Bros. Gaming universe, since its mid-1980s inception, has minted a reported $22 billion worldwide and sold close to 400 million games. Interesting, 22 billion was basically the amount of merchandising product spending that Star Wars had earned when Disney bought it. Back in 1993, Super Mario Bros. Was still popular enough to spur a potential stampede at the box office. Midwest exhibitor Rick Roman fired off a letter, correspondence which we've read, to then Disney Studios chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg, detailing his theories as to why the Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel movie buckled. How can a movie that has a primary market of 56 million kids who play the Mario video game relentlessly attract less than 10% of them, wrote Roman in a letter dated June 22, 1993. The pick opened to a 4-day of 8.5 million domestic over Memorial Day weekend. The answer lies in the advertising slogan chosen to sell the movie. This ain't no game. The film Super Mario Bros. Was precisely that it wasn't the game, wrote Roman. Katzenberg responded to Roman a month later on July 22, 1993, writing, "We have a few theories of our own around the studio and feel that clearly, for whatever reasons, the film fell short of satisfying the many fans of the video game. Although the film was long on ambition and imagination, it did not attempt to merely bring the video game to the screen. The filmmakers were quite successful in creating a fanciful world, but ultimately the script did not deliver in the way it could or should have. At all, if I can say, and I'll get to my point soon. Where am I going with this? Hold, grasshoppers. I promise to get there." Katzenberg further added, "As you may know, Hollywood Pictures did not fully finance or oversee the creative control of Super Mario Bros. The film was made by our partners at Synergy with the Hollywood banner and Buena Vista Pictures Distribution serving as the distributing entity in the case." Way to deflect, Jeffrey. Oh, Disney didn't make it. Now you just bought it to put out or distribute it for a fee. License it, call it what you want. Like any great animated film, think Shrek, Illumination stunted Super Mario Bros. By matching the biggest names in film right now to their respective character likenesses, i.e. Charlie Day as Luigi, Jack Black as Bowser, Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach, Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, etc. Then there was Guardians of the Galaxy star Chris Pratt in the title role of Mario. At first, there seemed to be some negative chatter online coming away from the fall trailer that dropped that Pratt's impression wasn't Italian enough. However, that thankfully blew over for Universal Illumination Nintendo and clearly did not impact the animated picture's ticket sales. The failure of the 1993 live-action production, which was mired in production problems, read the Variety piece here, was intended to be a prequel and concocted a story unrelated to the video game, with the setting being in sister world Dino Hatton. Female protagonist Daisy learns she's a descendant of dinosaurs, and she's kidnapped by King Koopa, played by Dennis Hopper. Toad isn't a talking mushroom, but a punk rocker. Brooklyn plumbers Mario and Luigi, Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo, by the way, brilliantly cast, ultimately rescue her from Koopa. Miyamoto's lack of involvement further exacerbated the pic's failure. At the time, the movie was a licensing experiment for Nintendo, and the Video Game Corporation gave creative control to the filmmakers. That wound up being bad hindsight move that prevented Nintendo from making another Super Mario Bros. Movie again, until they teamed up with Illumination decades later. So I'm not going to read this whole article. I just read that point for a little bit of background. Now, let me give you a little bit of background into myself. So, beginning in September of 1989, I had left my job. I'd worked on my first movie, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and I went to work for Bill Young, the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers. So, what he did was he didn't decide what movies were going to get made. When the executives who did decide what movies were going to get made, he was in charge of making sure that they could make them. I was hired as a new program that Bill started called the Management Trainee Program. And there was John Labib, Jamie Johnson, and myself. And we were hired to basically come in. We were basically glorified PAs. And the structure of how it worked there was Bill Young was the senior VP. And then there were executive production managers underneath Bill. And there was 3 of them at the time. There was Kurt Newman, who I worked for. There was Penelope Foster and Ron Smith. And Jamie Johnson worked for one. John Labib worked for one. And I worked for Kurt Newman. Interestingly enough, Kurt Newman's father had directed the original The Fly and Rocket Ship XM. So basically what our job was we would interface when a movie was being made. If it was on the Warner Brothers lot, they had production offices on the lot. Even if the movie was being made off the lot, they still had a production office on the lot. Basically, what I had to do was collect the production reports and call sheets, the daily information on the production of films, and distribute it to all of the executives at Warner Brothers. You know, basically, I was a paper pusher, but it gave me a lot of time to wander around the studio and meet people. It was the most amazing job I think I ever had. I was 22 years old, and it was insane that I was there. But one of the things that happened when I was at Warner Brothers was we made Bonfire of the Vanities. And you can read a book called The Devil's Candy about the making of Bonfire of the Vanities. Let me just say that the shitstorm that movie started up at the studio was insanity, because it was being directed by the great Brian De Palma. This was after coming off of The Untouchables. So Brian De Palma had directed Blowout. He had directed Carrie. He directed so many great films. The Fury, which has a great John Williams score. So a revered director. Well, one of the people that worked for him was a production manager, co-producer named Fred Caruso. Fred Caruso was one of the most Hollywood people I ever met, even as a management trainee. Whenever I walked into the production office of Bonfire of the Vanities, Fred Caruso shook my hand. He said hello. He remembered my name. When Christmas of 1989 rolled around, everybody, even me, all of us got a box of amaretto. The liqueur was sent to our office. Of course, he knew how to spend money, but I loved him immediately. Now, Fred Caruso was a guy that, as a production manager, here's some of the movies that Fred Caruso worked on. He was the unit production manager on The Godfather. He worked on The Happy Hooker, if you haven't seen that. He worked on Philip Kaufman's The Wanderers, for Brian De Palma, Dressed to Kill, Blowout. He worked on Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America. Michael Cimino's executive in charge of production, unit production manager on Year of the Dragon, the Schwarzenegger movie Raw Deal. He worked on Beverly Hills Cop 2. He worked on Blue Velvet. He worked on De Palma's Casualties of War, the movie that he made directly before he made Bonfire of the Vanities. And he also was the production manager on Super Mario Brothers. So I got to meet him on Bonfire of the Vanities. And he was really nice to me. So just to give you guys, here, you're going to love this. Here's a picture of me in my office on the Warner Brothers lot. Now, you can't really see, but if you just look to the left of me, I'm standing right next to the coffee maker that everybody in, and I was in the executive suite. Our office was at the corner. Bill's office was down the hall from me. Upstairs was Bob Daly and Terry Semmel's office around the studio. It was incredible. Bob Brassel right down the hallway. There was Alan Stewart. There was Lisa Henson. There was Bruce Berman. There was Mark Canton. It was a fantastic time to be at the studio, and I could go into anyone's office, and I was 22. It was fan-fucking-tastic, let me tell you. But anyway, I give you that background. So after I left the Warner Brothers, because the management trainee position was, the whole point was you worked at the studio for a couple of years, then you moved out. And then I went and worked at Silver Pictures for a while. Then I was the producer's assistant for pre-production of Free Willy. So I worked on Free Willy. And then I left Warner Brothers, and I went to work. My friend Taylor White hired me to come to work for a company called Altarian Studios. And Altarian Studios was a makeup effects company run by Tony Gardner. And it's still around today. And when I started there, the first thing I worked on was a cable movie produced by Gail Ann Hurd called Cast a Deadly Spell that starred Fred Ward as H.P. Lovecraft, a detective in a 1940s L.A. where everybody could use magic, but he didn't. And it was very much, there was a Cthulhu creature. It was great to work there. I also got to work on Mick Garris's movie Sleepwalkers. That was the first screenplay that Stephen King wrote. I worked on Army of Darkness. I have a screen credit on that. And at the time, I also worked on the Swamp Thing TV series. Here is me at Altarian Studios when I wasn't running around taking appliances to set. This is me painting a facial appliance. You can see this is a foam facial appliance. This is one of Dick Durock's facial appliances that would go on his face for the Swamp Thing TV series back in 1990. So that was when I would come back from runs or come back from the set. Everybody had to paint Swamp Thing appliances. So that was me. What happened, and I forgot to put up some. Forgive me, I forgot to put up some pictures. So at the time, one of the things that we wound up working on, they decided to make a Super Mario Brothers movie. And at the time, that movie was going to be directed by the man that directed Mom and Dad Save the World. So Mom and Dad Save the World was this film that was supposed to be a precursor to the Super Mario Brothers movie. And Mom and Dad Save the World, Terry Garr starred in it, and it was directed by Greg Beeman, and it was written by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon. Now, what's also crazy about this, so this was the Super Mario Brothers movie. What's crazy about this, it was being produced by director Roland Joffe's company, Light Motive. And who ended up working on the film as the unit production manager but Fred Caruso, who I had known from Warner Brothers. So when I was working at Altarian Studios, they basically said that, okay, Rob, since you know Fred Caruso, you are going to be the liaison between Altarian Studios that was going to do all of the special makeup effects, all the Koopas and everything. Now, at this time, the Super Mario Brothers movie that was being made had tremendous fealty to the game. The designs were very game-like, and I have to tell you, so imagine, if you will, we were in Irwindale, California, Monrovia, California. We had a gigantic warehouse facility. And if you can imagine, I want to say there was like 50 people. the way I remember it. Some of the greatest makeup effects people in the business. And the warehouse was full of facial appliances, all the different things you'd imagine that would be in the land of Super Mario Brothers was being manufactured. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Greg Beeman was going to direct the film. All was well. They must have been spending, and I don't know. I mean, I have to go back. I didn't call Tony. I didn't know I was going to do this stream, but it just hit me after reading how successful this was. But it was incredible. I mean, you'd see these things that we were making, and they were men in suit appliances, but they were incredible. The artwork was the sculpting. It was just amazing. So the entire facility was geared toward working on Super Mario Brothers. And so this is in Monrovia, Irwindale. This is about, 20 miles east of Pasadena. The Leitmotiv offices were on La Cienega, which is a very famous road. It would bisect Wilshire. It went right up to the Sunset Strip. And Leitmotiv's offices were on the east side of La Cienega, a couple of blocks below Sunset Boulevard. Right below Santa Monica Boulevard. And I would have to go there. And I was the liaison sort of between, so Fred Caruso could tell me what they needed from us, what they liked to see. Now, this was all pre-production and development. But there was no, I mean, it was full speed ahead. There was no thought that, hey, of course, Mom and Dad Save the World's going to be successful. They've got Greg Beeman, the director. It's going to be great. And we, of course, it was all staffed up, and there was a lot of money being spent on the pre-production of this movie. And it was fantastic. And I thought, my God, I'm working at the epicenter, ground zero of Hollywood. All these sculptors, everybody that Tony Gardner, because the makeup effects community is relatively small. And people would jump from like Tom Woodruff and Alec Gillis's facility. Hey, we were working on Alien 3 forever. Now we're over here. So everybody knew each other. It's a community. Everybody works for everybody else. It was incredible. And at that time, and I'm sure that if anybody's watching this or anybody could talk about this, it was an amazing time, and I thought the work was amazing. I would come back. I was running around going to different sets and would show up, and then I'd have to drive into Hollywood to go to Leitmotiv to talk to Fred Caruso. I'm just this kid. Hey, but because I'd worked in feature production at Warner Brothers, I had a lot of credibility as a liaison between a makeup effects department and somebody that worked for the senior VP of production at a studio. So I could talk the talk, and I understood what people wanted to know. So that's why I was in that position. And then one day, I don't presume to know what happened. Probably because Mom and Dad Saved the World, somebody saw it, and they decided that unfortunately maybe the director wasn't maybe the best person to direct the film. And I think they were like millions of dollars. I remember, this was 1990, 91. My recollection of this, we're talking 33 years ago. It was a long time ago. So my recollection might be off. But I want to say that they had spent at least $1 million making all of the stuff and they were in the process of developing it. It was nowhere near finished. It just poof went away. They decided to pull the plug. And our studio people, when that happens, and it happened in my own company when I was working on Chronicles of Narnia. I had a great contract with Disney. I didn't fight them one day. They just called up and decided to take a different path. I found out later I should have sued them, but I was scared. But that's a whole different story. I can tell you later. But it was this version, whatever this version of Super Mario Brothers was going to be, that our studio, that our Altarian Studios had done unbelievable work, went away. All that work, all that incredible sculpting and all those appliances and everything that they were building, it was really cool stuff. Just maybe Tony Gardner can tell you what happened to it. Somebody will do an article maybe on him, call him up, find out what happened. I don't know. All I knew is that my job was now in jeopardy because makeup effects companies they when they get a job, then they employ a bunch of people. When the job's over, the people go away and go to another makeup effects studio. That's kind of how Hollywood works. And that was it. That was no more going to Leitmotiv, no more talking to Fred Caruso, no nothing. After that, I ended up going to an advertising agency called Jacobs and Gerber, which, interestingly enough, this is interesting for Hollywood. So at Jacobs and Gerber, they this is 94, 95. Craig Mazin worked there, and Craig was a copywriter. He was famous for writing the tagline for Crimson Tide, "Danger runs deep." And it was a pretty cool place to work, and I was editing promos there, but it was just a very different, you never know when you're trying to work in Hollywood. Suddenly I'm editing network promos for the launch of UPN at the CBS Evening News at Jacobs and Gerber. It was a strange time, a very strange time, but Super Mario Brothers went away. Now, I did a cursory glance, and I was like, I wonder if anyone ever wrote an article about this. Well, lo and behold, today, interestingly enough, there is an article about Super Mario Brothers, and it was published just the other day. And I figured, I would delve into this because maybe reading a little bit about it, you might like to hear this, because I did, and I found it fascinating. So Ryan Scott wrote this. This was on Slash Film yesterday. And Super Mario Brothers, Tales from the Box Office, the disastrous Super Mario Brothers set the tone for video game movies for years to come. Now, I just gave this article a cursory glance. But what I found interesting about this article was there was no mention of the Greg Beeman Mom and Dad Save the World. There was no mention of Alterian Studios or all the work that was done. That period of time was sort of, because once that went away, and this happens a lot, believe it or not, there are, Bryan Singer was going to direct a version of Logan's Run after Superman Returns. The whole movie was previs. There was a previs department working on Logan's Run in Australia and on the Fox Studios lot. Never happened, went away, even though you can watch the previs. So this is not unusual for this to happen. But, Alterian Studios was pretty deep into it. Anyway, so this article that Ryan Scott wrote was published on Slash Film yesterday. It was true in the early 90s, and it remains true now. Mario is the king of video games. To this day, there's arguably no mascot more recognizable for an industry worth billions. And by the end of the 80s, Hollywood was starting to realize the whole video game thing was here to stay. Naturally, that meant capitalizing on the popularity with a major motion picture. It also meant that Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. Was the white whale of IP that any studio could hope to get their hands on. In 1993, the result of producer Roland Joffe's unlikely bid. Now, what's interesting about Leitmotiv, I don't know if I said this, Roland Joffe directed the movie The Killing Fields. That was up for Best Picture and came out in 1984. It lost to Amadeus. He also directed The Mission with Robert De Niro. He directed Fat Man and Little Boy. So he was a very prestigious director, and the fact that his company, Leitmotiv, was making Super Mario Brothers was crazy. In 1993, the result of producer Roland Joffe's unlikely bid to win those rights hit theaters and set the tone for video game movies for years to come, and not in a good way. Joffe, the director of Oscar-nominated films like The Killing Fields, had been wooing Nintendo, along with everyone else in Hollywood, for the rights to the popular characters. Despite having far less money and less clout than the competition, Joffe's Leitmotiv production company managed to beat the competition and in 1990 paid $2 million for the privilege of bringing Mario and Luigi to life. What followed was one of the most infamously disastrous productions ever. Today, in honor of Illumination's Super Mario Bros. Movie hitting theaters, we're looking back at the original live-action adaptation, how a pair of untested directors ended up at the head of a sinking ship, and the nightmare scenario that unfolded once the film hit theaters, and what lessons we can learn from it 30 years removed. Let's dig in, shall we? Roland Joffe's original pitch to Nintendo didn't include too much, or so the legend goes, only that he wasn't going to make a movie strictly for kids, with the idea being that they wanted to make something adults could enjoy as well. Script writing duties fell to Oscar winner Barry Morrow, who wrote Rain Man, who, by all accounts, turned in a great script, one capable of getting A-list talent such as Bob Hoskins and Dennis Hopper to sign on for major roles as Mario and King Koopa, respectively. Now, from what I remember, they were signed on to the version that Greg Beeman was going to direct. Unfortunately, Morrow's original script would never make it to the screen, as the film's producers insisted on having it rewritten over and over and over again all throughout production. According to Game Informer's 25th anniversary retrospective, Super Mario Bros. Was touched by at least 9 writers, including Ed Solomon from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in the 11th Hour. The film we ended up with centers on Brooklyn plumbers Mario and Luigi, played by John Leguizamo, who discover a parallel world full of the descendants of dinosaurs who were hurled into another dimension by a giant meteor 65 million years ago, rather than being destroyed. The brothers must battle the evil King Koopa and his Goombas, free Princess Daisy, played by Samantha Mathis, and save humanity. It sounds bizarre, because it is, and yes, it diverted from the games quite a bit. Hoskins, for his part, would later call it the worst thing I ever did. Speaking with The Guardian in 2007, the actor did not mince words. It was a fucking nightmare. The whole experience was a nightmare. It had a husband and wife team directing whose arrogance had been mistaken for talent. After so many weeks, their own agent told them to get off the set. Fucking nightmare. Fucking idiots. Rocky and Annabelle, The Flying Squirrel Show. So, Rocky and Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton were famous for the original, if memory serves, British Max Headroom. The original, hour-long Max Headroom show. Had no feature directorial credits to their name when they took on Super Mario Bros. With big-name directors such as Ivan Reitman happily having passed on the project, however, it was ultimately decided that some fresh blood was the way to go. I remember saying to Annabelle, "This is it. This is going to be our Batman." Morton recently told Total Film it would not become their Batman. That Total Film profile paints a picture of Jankel and Morton being dealt a bad situation by a meddling studio that refused to honor their original vision, leaving them scrambling the whole way and eventually holding the bag. Sets constructed by art director David Snyder, Blade Runner, who was going to be my production designer on Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner, the sequel to my first film, Free Enterprise, didn't match the script coming in. A scene from the end of Barry Morrow's script draft explaining that this was to be Mario and Luigi's origin story, which would in turn inspire the video games, was gone. When the new script came in, the storyboards I'd made just didn't make any sense. I wheeled them all into the parking lot and set fire to them because I didn't want anyone seeing them and getting confused, Morton explained in the same profile. Sympathetic as one can be 30 years later, it's worth pointing out that seemingly all of the cast and crew who worked on the film didn't have very nice things to say about Jankel and Morton, with the duo earning several nicknames during production, like Rocky and Annabelle, The Flying Squirrel Show. It was a tremendous relief to have gotten through the shoot, Jankel explained. We fulfilled our obligations, but when we left, we were utterly exhausted and decimated. It started off as brilliant and ended up being a very miserable experience. Unfortunately for them, the misery was only the beginning. Now, this is a fascinating article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here I'm going to drop it into the live chat. Now, there it is. So it's in the live chat. Now, for me, what I found interesting about this whole experience for my limited time working, it was fascinating to watch, and this happens a lot, because when you don't, dealing with IP, and we're seeing this now with everybody, we've seen it with Star Wars, we've seen it with Star Trek, you always have competing factions that are all trying to figure out they spent $2 million getting the rights to make that movie. That's a lot of money. It's not the $4 billion Disney spent to get the IP of Star Wars. But what ends up happening is, and this is the death knell of any IP, when you have competing factions that all want something different, like Roland Joffe was able to get the Super Mario Brothers he was able to get the rights. But they really didn't know. I mean, after Mom and Dad Save the World turned out not to be what Greg Beeman, their first director, turned out, it was not what they wanted, or he turned out to not be the director they thought he was going to be. Everybody panicked. And then once that happens, everyone puts in their 2 cents and you're dead in the water. And it happens a lot. People wonder, like with Star Wars, you have, and I think the lesson to be learned is you have all of these competing ideas about when a corporation buys an IP, what are they going to do with it? Well, Disney has theme parks. They want to be able to exploit the Star Wars IP in theme parks. Then they want to make movies or TV shows or merchandise. The thing is, the thing that drives all of this ultimately is the underlying item that you've purchased. And what Disney purchased was, let's go back to the beginning. They purchased Star Wars, the first Star Wars that came out in 1977. That is ground zero of the IP. The entire IP is defined by that first film. Since Disney has owned the IP, all they have done is diluted the brand. And look, remember, people, the Book of Boba Fett, you have a TV series, the Book of Boba Fett, is based on a character that was first introduced in the Star Wars Holiday Special in 1978. People forget that. Mandalorian, all of this stuff. And when you watch The Mandalorian or you watch Book of Boba Fett, since the first time we saw Boba Fett in live action was in The Empire Strikes Back, you have to ask yourself, is the Boba Fett that we've now seen, even George Lucas diluted that character in the prequel trilogy. Here's Jango Fett, his father. You see Boba Fett as a little kid. I mean, I understand why he did all that, but he was like, nobody wanted to see that. Boba Fett was badass. I mean, the character captured the imaginations of so many people by having a great costume, a weird, like ironing, an iron to iron your shirts ship, which was I love it. I love the slave one. It's such a weird thing, but I love it. And yet the character has been diluted in every subsequent appearance. I think the only people that really got Boba Fett right were the people that first did the Marvel comic books and then Dark Horse. But since then, all of Star Wars has been diluted because everybody has different ideas. Even George Lucas. There's an argument to be made that with the prequel trilogy, he had a great story to tell. Not well told, but a great story about democracy dying and how the Republic is replaced by an empire, which goes all the way back to Rome. So it's from my perspective, watching an IP that there was a course. They were on this course. They had a director. They had an effects company, a makeup effects company with the best people in the business doing all of this amazing work. And then, because suddenly everybody balked. Everybody flinched. Who knows? Greg Beeman might have made a great movie. But again, you're only as good as your last project. Mom and Dad Save the World did not save the world. It did not catch the world on fire. And he was out. Everybody second-guessed everything. And it went to hell. And they hired these 2 new directors that had never directed a feature, but they were cool because they made, if you've seen, I used to have it on Laserdisc, the Max Headroom pilot before the TV show, it was really cool. So again, it's like, if you follow that up, it's what happened in the 90s with all the music video directors, all the people that came out of propaganda, like Dominic Sena and, of course, Fincher and Michael Bay. I mean, all those guys came out of directing music videos, and then they made the leap to feature films. Although David Fincher actually worked on Return of the Jedi, doing some photography at ILM when he was like 18. So it's really interesting to delve into this stuff. And I just thought I would tell this story about a little glimpse of what I saw of the movie that never was, the Super Mario movie that Greg Beam was going to direct, that Altarian Studios and Tony Gardner and some of the best makeup effects people in the business were doing, that was much more faithful to the video game than the 1993 movie that got made. And it's interesting because no one ever talks about it. It's part of the story, but because it never happened and it was just, I guess, swept under the carpet, nobody remembers. But I remember, because I had to drive from Irwindale, Monrovia to the middle of West Hollywood on the border of Beverly Hills. And that was a long drive, and I could never find a place to park. So here's to Fred Caruso. Here's to Roland Joffe. Here's to the people that they set out on a path, and I think the path they first chose was the correct one. And then they balked. And then we wound up with what we wound up with. But hey, it's going up to the top of the charts, and people are finding, they're rediscovering the movie yet again, which is kind of cool. You know, I'd say that's kind of cool. So there you go. I hope that story was fun for anybody to hear. And I know people have been firing in super chats and things. So let me first start with tips. People who've sent in tips. Oh my God, Sylvain Saint Laurent. Sylvain, I don't know what I have done to engender your desire to support this channel the way you do, but it is very much appreciated. Plus, your name is Sylvain Saint Laurent, which is probably, is that your real name, or is that just the coolest name you made up? It's a cool name. I would like to be named Sylvain Saint Laurent. Sends in a $125 tip. Sylvain says, a powerful scene in Picard Season 3, Episode 8 is the spot scene with Data versus Lore. He's the best of me, the last of me. And then you took the things that were me, and by doing so, you've become me. We are now one. As a father, that level of writing is amazing. I have to say, look, I think what people... I've been touting and singing the praises of Picard Season 3 since I was afforded an early glimpse almost a year ago. And there's a lot of people nitpicking the universe stuff, like, why is there a escape hatch here? Or why do they cock phasers or whatever? To me, the thing about Star Trek Picard Season 3 that I love so much, and I keep saying it, and I'm going to say it again, I think of it as the color of money of Star Trek, if you want to. The Color of Money was a sequel to the movie The Hustler that was made in the 60s. Obviously, Paul Newman came back as Fast Eddie Felson, the character he made indelible back in the 60s in The Hustler, where he starred with Jackie Gleason. In The Color of Money in 1986, he co-starred with Tom Cruise, and you met this character 25 years later in his life. He didn't amount to what he hoped to amount to in The Hustler, but it was an interesting story. Now, both of those books, both The Hustler and Color of Money, were written by novelist Walter Tevis, who also wrote The Man Who Fell to Earth, and he also wrote a book that I've spoken about on the show before called Mockingbird, that I think should be a great... I can't believe it hasn't been adapted. It would make a great streaming series. I don't know who has the rights. There's probably so much money against this book that it would be cost prohibitive to develop it. But if anybody wants to read what I thought was a really great science fiction novel, find Walter Tevis's Mockingbird. And I heard an interesting story, and a woman producer that I can't remember. This is again like 30 years ago. This woman producer told me that she got mugged, like in Beverly Hills, and like, I don't know if she was held at gunpoint or something, and she had to turn over her wallet. And being a producer, she said, well, what do I get? And the person who mugged her handed her Walter Tevis's book, Mockingbird. I don't remember who told me that story, but it's a great story. I want to believe it's true. And why shouldn't it be? You know, print the legend, right? Isn't that what John Ford said? But if you want to read a great science fiction story that has a lot of feeling, emotion, and melancholy in it, but Star Trek Picard Season 3, to me, it's all about character. And it's about seeing these favorite, beloved, fictional characters that were essentially written as archetypes during the 7 seasons of Next Generation, But now we get to see them as fully developed characters going through real emotion, looking back on their lives. There's regret, there's tragedy, grief, all of those things. And I have been moved. I have been brought to tears multiple times. And I think it's incredible. And by the way, it sticks the landing. We have episodes 9 and 10 to watch, which are essentially a 2-hour feature film. Really great stuff. So, Sylvain, I'm glad you're digging it. And as a father, I'm sort of a stepfather to two girls, and I kind of feel the same way. Amazing stuff. And I promise you, you're going to like where it goes. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Alan Renshaw says, with the success of the Super Mario Brothers movie, how long do you think it will be before we get an announcement that a sequel, Donkey Kong, Yoshi, Metroid, Zelda movie is in development? Nobody probably thought it would do this well opening weekend. I don't know. John Campea did, and I think some other people did too. I mean, the thing about Mario is it's been around for 40 years. Maybe not Super Mario Brothers, but certainly Mario and Donkey Kong have. It's multi-generations, so pretty cool. I'm very excited that it's doing as well as it's doing. But I'd love to see a Metroid Prime movie. I would love to see that. And Zelda, who doesn't want to see that? We've been talking about that on the John Campea show too. I think definitely, probably tomorrow. They'll announce one tomorrow. They've moved the Illumination. We're going into production tomorrow. Alan Renshaw also goes on to say, he sends in a tip and says, I'm a little surprised we didn't get announcements of Obi-Wan Season 2. I would rather have an Obi-Wan Season 2 than the Rey Star Wars film we're getting. Rise of Skywalker was hot garbage, and I don't understand why we are getting a sequel to that. Well, simply put, take our feelings out of it. It still made $1 billion. I mean, if I was J.J. Abrams and my first film made $2 billion and I got a percentage of that, and then I made $1 billion film, I'd be like, yeesh. But it still made $1 billion. And when you look at not many movies, I mean, now it seems like every movie makes $1 billion, but they don't. Rise of Skywalker still made $1 billion. If they're going to continue the Skywalker saga, that's the interesting thing. Are they going to make it episode 10? I don't know, but it makes sense to me from a business standpoint. I mean, I get it. See, because the thing is, a corporation doesn't know. They just look and go, this movie made $1 billion. They don't know how well the fans, they just know the fans, somebody paid $1 billion for it. And if a movie makes $1 billion, it doesn't matter whether it's hot garbage from and this is again, the disconnect from the IP holders, owners. Disney's like, not many movies have made $1 billion. This one did. Let's make another one. So, but I agree with you. Brian Osborne says, hey, Rob, I picked up the Cool Hand Luke 4K Steelbook the other day, and I wanted to ask, who would you say has the coolest on-screen persona in Hollywood history, Steve McQueen or Paul Newman or someone else? I say McQueen. Your thoughts? Okay, here's the thing about Paul Newman. Paul Newman is a badass, but and in Cool Hand Luke, he is definitely cool. And I thought he was cool as Fast Eddie Felson, but he's also a romantic lead. And Steve McQueen was a bad boy, even though he could be romantic, getaway and all that. So I got to give it to you, Brian. I think you're right. I think Steve McQueen is absolutely one of the coolest personas in Hollywood history. Probably he had a little bit more longevity than somebody like James Dean or whatever, but I would give it up. There's a lot of really cool, I mean, if you look at, there's French stars like Alain Delon, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing his name. I mean, Le Samurai, he's pretty cool, but Steve McQueen was and plus in real life, his real life, he lived up to his on-screen persona. So he's pretty badass. So I'm going to give it to you. I'll say Steve McQueen. I have no problem with that. Anonymous. Ooh, this is interesting. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, Robert, I love your work and podcasts. I was the production coordinator for for Super Mario Brothers, and that was one of 3 pictures I did with Fred Caruso. I talked with him just a few weeks ago. I worked on Mario from February through October. Feel free to ask me anything regarding Mario. Well, I would ask you, do you remember when Altarian Studios, and do you remember when it was under development? You probably didn't work on the film then, because this is all pre-production. But I'm wondering, do you have any recollection of any of that? Because there was a lot of people who worked really hard on that movie, and a lot of money was spent. So if you've been watching all night tonight, since this show started the last hour, do you remember any of that? I'd love to hear anything anybody remembered, only because that was my part to play. I was a messenger boy, but it was interesting because I was the only one going to Leitmotiv, and I was the only one talking to Fred Caruso, who, by the way, Fred Caruso I love that guy. And the thing about him was he was a New York production coordinator, and he was a New York line producer, and he was in New York, which is a different animal entirely, because if you've watched The Offer, you understand what it's like to have to produce a movie in New York. It's very different than having to produce a movie out here. It's funny because one of my dad's best friends before he passed away was a gentleman named Earl Bush, who was involved heavily with the Hollywood Teamsters, and man, did I learn a lot from Earl Bush. Rest in peace. Boy, were you a good man, Earl. Darth Plato says, your description of the Trek IP sounds like a balkanization has set in along grounds reminiscent of orthodoxy versus heterodox versus heresy versus, and possibly even iconoclasm. Well, look, here's the thing with everybody who controls IP thinks they know what's best for the IP, and the thing about what's interesting about Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout is they got a contract from Paramount who said, there's nobody at Paramount that knows what to do with the Star Trek IP. That seems strange, but there's no Star Trek executive. There should be a Star Trek executive making 6 figures who works at Paramount that knows everything there is to know about the IP. There's never been one. It's always been something, and not only that, the Star Trek IP has always been looked down upon because it was always a niche franchise. It wasn't until, and it had the goofy fan base, it had people protesting the end of Enterprise, it had a letter writing campaign in the 60s. It's never received the respect it deserved. The most respect it ever had was during the Berman era in the mid-90s. 94, probably, when you had Generations, when Next Generation went off the air it was getting like, the ratings were huge. I mean, when it went off the air, the Next Generation ratings were huge. All good things. First run syndication, it changed the face of television. Then 6 months later, Generations came out. It was on the cover of Time magazine. Patrick Stewart and Shatner together. Deep Space Nine was on. Voyager was going to launch the UPN network. I mean, Star Trek was at its zenith. And that was all under Rick Berman. And Rick Berman controlled the franchise. He started working with Gene Roddenberry, but Gene Roddenberry passed away in 91. But Berman ran 25 seasons of Star Trek for 18 years, from 87 to 2005. And what happened was, things started to change. And then, unfortunately, Enterprise, which gets a bad rap, Enterprise, Elizabeth saying, I wasn't going to even do this show tonight, but Elizabeth saying, aren't you glad you went on? Yeah, I guess this is fun. I didn't know if anyone was going to watch this show. But, the Star Trek IP, from a studio level, they've never known what to do with it. And so Alex Kurtzman, and the people at Secret Hideout took the Star Trek franchise the same way that Bad Robot did, as a money-making proposition. Bad Robot thought that they were going to easily, they tried to get rid of, the funny thing about Bad Robot and the funny thing about J.J. Abrams, by all accounts, working for Bad Robot and the people at Bad Robot are a closely knit group. They do good work. They've made great TV. And they thought by getting the Star Trek franchise, it was going to be a license to print money. One of the things they started or tried to do was get rid of all old classic Star Trek merchandise. Back in 2012, La La Land Records released a box set of the original series music, which us music aficionados and Star Trek fans, the Holy Grail, one of the greatest CD releases of all time. They even found music that had never been released. Shout out to Lucas Kendall, everybody at La La Land Records, Jeff Bond. Jeff Bond, by the way, wrote a great book on the music of Star Trek. So the people that take the Star Trek franchise over look at it as a money-making proposition. Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout have figured out a way. They keep making shows, so they keep making money for themselves. Have they done the best by the franchise? I would say not. The attempts at trying to get Star Trek 4 made, that's a bad robot thing. How come they haven't been able to do that? They haven't been able to do that because they don't know how to make a Star Trek movie for $125 million or $100 million. You make a banger of a Star Trek movie. You go look at a first season Deep Space Nine episode, like the penultimate episode of the first season, Duet. It's basically a person in a room. You look at the Next Generation episode, Chain of Command Part 2, from the 6th season of TNG. You have that's Picard facing off against Gul Madred. There are 4 lights. 2 guys in a room. 2 Shakespearean RSA actors, or RSC, Royal Shakespeare Company actors, going mano a mano. That's a great episode of Star Trek. Somebody's got to figure out how to make Star Trek movies for less than $100 million. That's what this franchise demands. If you did that, you would really have something. And Paramount even own a script that I've talked about a lot, written by Eric Jedrinson. In after Enterprise went off the air, there was a script written by Eric Jedrinson, who was the supervising producer of HBO's Band of Brothers. He knew nothing of Star Trek. He'd never seen Star Trek. And he was hired under Donald DeLine and Carey McCluggage, who were in charge of the studio at the time, to come up with an idea for a Star Trek movie. He wrote a script called Star Trek: The Beginning. What he did was he immersed himself the same way that Nicholas Meyer did when he made Star Trek 2. Nicholas Meyer hadn't seen Star Trek, didn't know anything about Star Trek, but he's a classical storyteller. He's a great storyteller. He was very highly educated. He understands stories. He was able to write novels. He was writing plays. He had made Time After Time, which is a terrific science fiction film. Jedrinson did the same thing. Great storyteller, understood where the tropes of the franchise worked, immersed himself in Star Trek, and wrote a canonical story that, coincidentally, opens with graduation day with a graduating class of Starfleet Academy. I mean, it's everything they want. And it's all about the outbreak of the Romulan War and how Earth, the interesting thing about Enterprise was that the Vulcans had come to Earth and were suppressing human achievement. No, we don't want you to get a warp drive. And that was really interesting. This script flips that script, literally. And the outbreak of the Romulan War starts when the Romulans demand Earth expels Vulcans off Earth. And Earth says, fuck you. And it has a whole new cast of great characters, graduates from Starfleet Academy. The script opens. You have the Paramount Mountain, and the way it's written, the camera comes over, and you're on the islands outside of San Francisco off the coast, and you're watching a regatta, you're watching a boat race, a hover catamaran boat race, where all these Starfleet Academy cadets that have just graduated, it's their final, it's like graduation day, and they're having this boat race into San Francisco Harbor, into Starfleet Academy. And you meet these characters while they're competing against one another, and then there's like admirals and Captain Archer, and it goes from there. It's so great. But there's only a single draft written. And then, of course, Carey McCluggage and Donald DeLine, their administration at Paramount, there was never a second draft made. Movie never happened. Bad Robot took over, got the rights in 2007, and we ended up with Star Trek 09. Anyway, just an aside. So Darth Plato, there you go. The problem is no one who's created Star Trek since 2009 understands what Star Trek is. They've all tried to turn it into something else. Alex Kurtzman has said, we're going to use the Star Trek franchise for our messaging. He's flat out said it. Our messaging. Not about characters and story, but we're going to use the Star Trek franchise, that's always been progressive, to message. The reason Star Trek Picard Season 3 is so effective, and the reason why people like it so much, not everyone likes it, but the reason why people like it so much is it's about characters and story. It's about emotion. It's about people that have grown older, wiser, and now are confronting their past, their responsibilities, and what it all means. It's real storytelling within the context of an action-adventure sci-fi franchise. And that's what Star Trek does best. So, but thanks for that, Darth Plato. And now we got a bunch of super chats. Let me get to those. And by the way, for those of you who are new to the channel, I do read people's letters. You can write me a letter under there at postgeeksingularity.com. Our website was acting up, but I do read letters live on the show, and you can send me letters. So send me letters. Wow, there's a lot of super chats here. Well, there you go. Connor Thorne says, if you had to pitch a Star Trek show, what would your pitch be? Well, it's interesting because my pitch, they kind of, I hate to say this, I'm not going to say they stole it, but so when I was working on Superman Returns for Bryan Singer, I was in Seattle, where I'm from, with Bryan, and Bryan, Chris McQuarrie, Mission Impossible Chris McQuarrie, and I were having a very sake-soaked, very expensive sushi dinner in Madison Park, where Chris McQuarrie lives. And so did my grandparents. And, you know, this was after Enterprise ended. It was in 2006. And I said, you know what, we should go into Paramount and pitch. Here I was with Bryan Singer and Chris McQuarrie. Like, what did I know? I'd made Free Enterprise, but these guys, Chris had made Way of the Gun, and he'd written the Academy Award-winning Usual Suspects, and Bryan just finished directing Superman Returns. But anyway. So I said we should come up with a Star Trek idea and take it into Paramount and pitch it. And I was like, Chris, you're going to write it. Bryan, you direct, and of course I'll be your consultant. and I threw out this idea. I said, here's my idea. What would happen if the Federation just got old, you know, and things happened, you know, the Klingon Empire decided to pull back, and sort of there was a big reformation in the Klingon Empire, and they became, you know, more spiritual. And what if the Vulcans and the Romulans reunified, and the universe changed as time does that to societies, and the Federation had gotten old, and the age of exploration was over, and the Federation was kind of falling apart, and it was taking place in the year 3000. That was my idea, and the idea was Star Trek Federation, and how do you restore the luster? And the whole thing was going to be an allegory for America. How do we get America? And this is 2006. How do we get America? How do we make America? I mean, I hate to say it, but how do we make America great again? How do we get back to our core values, you know, of we the people? How do we do that? And not through zealotry, but how do we, like, by building back our infrastructure and finding out what our core values are, and once again reaching out to the stars, bring back the age of exploration. And then within all of this, within the context of this, there is an extra galactic threat. Well, I contacted a guy I was working with named Jeff Thorne, very talented novelist. He's written a couple of Star Trek novels. He's also a TV producer and writer. And I pitched all these ideas to Jeff because Bryan said, write a treatment and get it to us, and we'll see. So I contacted Jeff Thorne, and I gave him my ideas. I said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what I want to do. Write this up. And Jeff Thorne wrote, I thought, a pretty great treatment/Bible called Star Trek Federation. Contacted Mike Akuda. I said, Mike, can you create a logo within the current Star Trek iconography for Star Trek Federation? He did that. And while all of this was in process being done, within that time frame, it was announced that J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot made a deal with Paramount to control the Star Trek franchise. And they took it over. So Star Trek Federation never made it past the first pass of the document that Jeff had written based on the ideas I gave him that I discussed with Chris McQuarrie and Bryan Singer at dinner. So that was, and interestingly enough, Star Trek Discovery is now in the 31st century. Wasn't what I would have done, but, you know, what can I say? Not accusing anybody of anything, But you can look it up. You can look up Star Trek Federation. There's been people that have covered it because I've sent the document out. And again, like the Star Trek, the beginning script that Eric Jedrinson wrote, the Star Trek Federation treatment was only a first draft. We never got around to doing anything more with it. It was never pitched. No one ever talked about it. It was just internal. I'd given it to Brian, and we never really moved forward on it. So there you go, Connor Thorne. Connor Thorne also says, is Enterprise any good, since I feel like it's the least talked about Star Trek show? I think Enterprise is there's a lot of great episodes in Enterprise. But again, a lot of it was written by Brandon Braga and Rick Berman. And Brandon Braga started working on Star Trek in the 4th season of TNG. He came in as a Writers Guild intern, and he was lucky to get placed there. And I think that they could have used a few other creative entities to help them figure that out. But also, one of the things about Star Trek Enterprise that Brandon and Rick had to face was the Paramount let them do whatever they want because they delivered every season on time and on budget. Rick Berman was an incredible TV producer, meaning that he would bring in 26 episodes on time and on budget because he understood if you wanted to do more, if you wanted to have more money, you want to do a best of both worlds and have more effects, then you pull back and you make a bottle episode and shoot on your standing sets so they cost less. He was an incredible producer. When they were making Enterprise, they had incredible interference from the network, CW, all these other people for the first time. And the idea was in Enterprise Season 1, they were going to deal a lot with geopolitics. Now the Vulcans were not allowing the humans to go into space. And the entire first season of Enterprise was going to originally take place on Earth. And it was going to end with the NX-01 being launched. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And they had to. And famously, even the executives, I swear to God, they're like, you guys have like a mess hall on the ship, right? So can't we have like a band, like every week have a new band come and play? And Brandon and Rick are like, we don't like come back to Earth and change bands. So, but Enterprise has a lot of great stuff. It's got some of my Cogenitor. I think Cogenitor, in the second season, talk about gender ideology and stuff like that. It's one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek, really. It is a great episode of science fiction, a great episode of Star Trek, and it packs one hell of a wallop when it's over. And if you're a canonical Star Trek fan, the 4th season, after you get past the ridiculous alien Nazi episode, the 4th season of Enterprise is terrific. It's what the show should have been from the beginning. Glenn Mark says, this comment presumes, this is for everybody, Glenn Mark. This comment presumes you've seen Manifest Season 4, Part 1. I'm listening to a Shatner book, and I saw Manifest Season 4, Episode 5. Had Ben's daughter not been safe, Ashes of Eden. Ooh, I like that. I'm not going to say what that means, but you're not wrong. Call Me Ish became a new member of the channel. Well, I will call you Ish. And welcome to the channel as a PGS hero. Thank you for and for all of you who are new to the channel. So every other Saturday we have member calls, and how those work, they start at 11 o'clock on Saturday. Everybody comes to a Zoom call. You raise your hand, and it used to be 10 minutes, but more people came. So for 7 minutes, we all just talk. You can say whatever the hell you want to me. You can say you hate my guts. You can tell me what I'm doing wrong, or you can say how great I am. I don't care. The floor is yours. And it's really fun because people come from all over the world. And there's been people, there's people on the channel that have been members for a long time. Some people's sons have joined the military and are now Black Hawk helicopter pilots. So it's a pretty great time. So we do that every other Saturday when we don't have Que Pasa PGS with Roberto Suarez and Alex Montano's 97% Spanish show. So that's coming up this coming Saturday is a member call. So if you're a member, remember I send out a link on you'll get it as a member of the channel. So it's a lot of fun. Carlos Lima says, hey, Rob, I loved your work on Army of Darkness, Evil Dead. And by the way, I worked on Army of Darkness while I was also working on Super Mario Brothers, while I was working on Sleepwalkers and the Swamp Thing show. Just curious if you were an extra on that film. I never was an extra. Could have sworn one of the Army Deadites looked like you. Keep up the great work. Love your channel. Stay safe. Wait a minute. Was I? I don't think I was. I don't think I was because I was always working. And so my Altarian Studios was doing all the Evil Ash stuff and a lot of the Deadite stuff. And the two places that I was going all the time was in Acton, which is down the 14 freeway. It's north of LA. And then in West Hollywood, the Introvision Studios. And for those of you who are, if you read Cinefex magazine, or if you're a special effects fan, this guy named Tom Nod started a company called Introvision. And Introvision was a really interesting in-camera effects technique. And there's some famous Introvision shots, like in Stand By Me when the kids are running away from the train. That's an Introvision shot. So they would have live action and a plate shot combined in one shot. The first Introvision movie that was famous was Outland, Peter Hyams' Outland from 1981. And the thing about, so there was they spent a lot of time on the Introvision stages. The problem with Introvision as a company was Introvision wanted you, when you went there, kind of like ILM, they wanted to be a full service house. So they wanted you to use their model department. They had all these departments, and it was expensive. It was time consuming. But Army of Darkness used Introvision a lot. But if you're an Introvision fan, Outland is generally considered to be the first Introvision film. And there's I think is it Cinefex issue 4, maybe? That has the Con-Am 27 mining facility on Io. It's a cover story. It's worth looking up. You can get it online. It's fascinating. The story of Introvision is really fascinating. Carlos says, love your channel, stay safe. Well, thank you, Carlos. Now, I'm never even driving anywhere anymore, so I'll try and stay safe. Nikki says, I have fond memories of the 93 Mario Brothers movie. I knew it was bad, but I still loved it. Probably because I grew up watching Tim Burton movies, and I love Mario too much. I love you. Well, Nikki, thanks for that. I love you too. But, it's interesting. The thing about the Super Mario Brothers movie that I find it fascinating to watch, because it's kind of got, despite the directors getting slagged off on, because they came from Max Headroom and stuff, there's a really interesting vibe. It's totally wrong for I don't think I've ever seen a movie it's so wrong for any fans of the original IP. But as a movie itself, it's so weird. Like, how did they, with all those different writers, all these weird amalgamations of things? Yes, the asteroid created like Dino Hatton. It's so weird. You wonder, how did this movie get made? Like, seriously, how did it get made? I don't know. Well, I do know, but it was crazy. But I understand people liking it because there's no other movie like it. I mean, I was talking the other day on a stream about Jonathan Batul, who wrote The Last Starfighter. He wrote and directed like T-Rex with Whoopi Goldberg. It was a very different movie the way it was written, the serious Blade Runner-esque movie that turned into T-Rex with Whoopi Goldberg. What do you do? Garfield's Bizarre Adventure sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, I discovered you on the Critical Drinkers stream, and I've been a fan ever since. You're intelligent, insightful, and most importantly, very funny. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. By the way, give it up for the Critical Drinker. For those of you who might not, if you don't listen to the Critical Drinker, I love his channel. I love him. I think he's really insightful. In real life, he's a novelist. But something really interesting happened, and we should be looking more. I mean, of course, there's people, the old Collider crew like Perry Nemiroff and Scott Mance and those people. They do great interviews. I think Perry Nemiroff is a great interviewer on stage, and so is Scott Mance, obviously. But for the new movie, The Pope's Exorcist, the studio went to the Critical Drinker and offered up an interview with Russell Crowe. Now, why is that important? It's important because the Drinker on his regular channel has over 1 million subscribers, and YouTube pundits have become the primary entertainment journalists that's not to take away from Richard Rushfield or anybody or Jeffrey Wells or people that have been writing on the industry forever. But the Drinker has 1 million views. 1 million subscribers. So when the studio goes, well, why aren't we going to him and having him? He's a smart guy. He can interview Russell Crowe, and they did. So that was a a pretty big coup as far as the entertainment space goes to see somebody like The Drinker, who I like very much, getting that interview. Very, very cool. And by the way, thank you for the kind words. I very much appreciate it. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure. Joe Panora says, you look like Christopher Walken in King of New York in that photo. I'll take it. I have the steelbook of King of New York in 4K. I love King of New York. Abel Ferrara. That movie has a David Caruso, Lawrence Fishburne. That movie has a great cast. I love King of New York. And if you think I look like Walken, I'll take it. Jermaine King says, release the R&B Mario Brothers cut. Well, there isn't one because it never happened. But it would be cool. I mean, maybe Tony Gardner, and you know what? I think they had to destroy all that shit. I think, and they can't talk about it. I don't know exactly how it all works, but it would be I would love to see that stuff again because it was so cool. Tom A with a $20 super chat says, this is not unique to Hollywood. I do infrastructure installation, and when you get too many cooks in the kitchen, the end result is miserable. Corners get cut because you spent half the budget on management and hands on deck. Yeah, man. I mean, we're never going to solve the homeless problem in California because here's $1 billion to make low-income housing. But, of course, then it all costs $800,000 a unit because everybody gets their taste. How are we ever going to solve problems? It's not good. We got to figure this shit out. Phalanx 68, it became a new member. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Welcome to the channel. Rhett Proctor says, I saw the new Mario movie yesterday, and it was amazing. As a lifelong Mario fan, it was everything I hoped for, just like the games. But in the sequel, they need to bring in the Koopalings and Bowser Jr. Well, I think it's really interesting that here's a movie, and I've been very curious watching. I mean, I don't think the critical establishment understands how beloved the Mario series has been across many different video game platforms, and how much fun, and we're talking over 40 years now. And you go back to, as I said, going back to the arcade Donkey Kong and the ColecoVision, after Atari 2600 and 5200, then there was Intellivision, and then there was ColecoVision. What was one of the ColecoVision launch games? Donkey Kong. I mean, taking it home. I remember it was amazing. So you have over 40 years of people, and the people at Illumination took such care to make that game. I mean, if you're a Mario fan, John was telling me that when him and Ann went to Mario World at Universal, that she walked through the entrance and was crying. I mean, people love this franchise. It goes back to their childhood and stays like Star Trek with me, growing up with Star Trek and Star Trek Change and Evolve. The Mario franchise has done the same thing. You have people that have grown up their entire lives with new iterations of Mario. And Mario Kart, what a fun game to play. Maria Espino says, Rob, can you talk about who is the actual person that greenlit the original Star Trek show in 1966? Desilu. Well, famously, the person that basically was responsible for getting Star Trek made was Lucille Ball. That's right. I Love Lucy. Famously, Star Trek had made a pilot with Captain Pike called The Cage that was rejected by the network for a number of reasons. I mean, the popular mythology is that it was deemed too cerebral. But without Lucille Ball's continued involvement and encouragement, and without her saying, nope, let's go make another pilot, it was Lucille Ball who was responsible for the Star Trek franchise. And Desilu was Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. And it's interesting because if you watch Star Trek, I don't know if they're on the Blu-rays, but at the end of every Star Trek episode, the Desilu logo. Yeah. That's who's responsible. There would be no Star Trek without Lucille Ball, which is pretty interesting. Faye Walkington became a new member. Thanks, Faye. I appreciate that. So did Anthony M. Joseph Michael with a $50 super chat says, Rob, have you seen the new Super Mario Brothers movie? I have. While I thought it was fine, I don't disagree with the critical consensus that this film was more focused on fan service than making a film that also works as a movie from a narrative sense. Joseph Michael goes on and adds to that and says, another thing, While I look forward to the inevitable sequels and spin-offs, I can't help but think that Illumination might also be putting the universe before their characters and stories. Joseph, a very astute thing to say, and of course a lot of reviewers have pointed this out. So what Joseph is saying, and I don't necessarily think you're wrong here. It gets into this whole philosophical, I mean, maybe I could do another Robservations on this, but it gets into a whole philosophical conversation about the difference between making a great classical animated film. I mean, if you go back and you look at Snow White, or you look at Pinocchio, obviously adaptations of fairy tale, short story, or classic works, those films are universal, and they're great stories that transcend the time in which they're made. The Super Mario Brothers movie skates by, and I'll admit this, skates by on touching every iteration, or, I mean, it really is, there is a lot of fan service there, and it's missing maybe the critical universal storytelling that some of the great animated films have. The way that Miyazaki's movie, whether you're watching Princess Mononoke, My Neighbor Totoro, Nausicaa, or Howl's Moving Castle. I mean, those classical, incredible stories that transcend the format and transcend the time in which they're made to become truly timeless classics. Perhaps Super Mario doesn't necessarily have that kind of a story. But I would say to you this. Was it supposed to? Because I see what you're saying, and I'm a classicist when it comes to storytelling. But the thing is, they knew what they were doing, and they knew what their audience wanted. And I would dare say, like, and this might be unpopular, I didn't like the first Harry Potter movie. Chris Columbus directed it, and I had read it, so I only read the first Harry Potter book. I thought the first movie was a slavish recreation of the book without the magic. And they were so interested in having fealty to what J.K. Rowling had written that they bled away. A movie's got to adapt. You've got to move and flow. You've got to translate a book into a cinematic medium. Otherwise, you miss something. I thought they fixed those problems as the Harry Potter franchise went on. But I think, look, this Mario Brothers movie planted a flag, and if we are going to get if we're going to get Bowser Jr. in another movie, it's okay. It was successful, but I don't think you're wrong, Joseph. I don't think you're wrong. But the question is, in this particular case, you got to look at everything on a case by case basis. On this particular case, is that a bad thing? And obviously, this is an epic win for everybody involved. So I would say the next movie might be better. But I think that you're not wrong. By the way, thank you for supporting the channel. It means a great deal to me, and that's very generous of you. Thank you. I laughed, not at you. I laughed at 200 Watt Studio because he's been badgering me for this. 200 Watt Studio says, seriously, does Captain Liam Shaw give Seven the last seat on an evac pod while he sacrifices himself to save Picard and the crew, telling Seven, "It's been an honor to serve with you, Commander"? Okay, this would be something that probably maybe is going to happen in the last two episodes of Picard Season 3. And I will tell 200 Watt Studio again what I told him before. Here's the answer to the question. Let me read it again. Seriously. Does Captain Shaw give Seven the last seat on an evac pod while he sacrifices himself to save Picard and crew, telling Seven, "It's been an honor to serve with you, Commander"? Here's what I have to say to that. And now moving on. I'm not gonna. We got 2 more episodes, bro. I'm not gonna tell you. I've actually, for all of the reputation I have as a spoiler, I think that I've done quite well keeping the secrets of Picard Season 3, and I'm not gonna spill them now. Not at the 11th hour. Haunted Autumn says, "Are Are we physical media collectors supposed to pretend we're not angry with DVD buyers? This insistence to remain 2 generations behind is the equivalent to insisting on buying Betamax over DVDs. They are killing our high-def dreams. Well, what Haunted Autumn is referring to, obviously for those of you who are new to the channel, I do a show every Sunday at 11 o'clock called Let's Get Physical Media, where I talk about, what we buy for the week. I mean, this week I showed about the new 4K of Cool Hand Luke from Warner Brothers. The 4K of Midnight Run, which is one of my great movies of the 80s. Of course, the 4K of Maltese Falcon came out this week. The 4K of Star Trek The Next Generation came out. And also a 25th anniversary set. Oops, those things are falling off of me. 25th anniversary set of Cowboy Bebop. I got that. So what Haunted Autumn is saying is that so for those of you who might not know, I'll ask you, what do you think the biggest home video format is in the world, physical media-wise? Kid you not, it's still DVD. And it's still DVD because here's the thing. A lot of people, especially with kids, they just take their movies. In order to benefit from 4K discs, you have to have a 4K TV, and you have to have, if you can, a banger of a surround sound system. I have a 7.1 Dolby Atmos surround sound system that I can expand to 13.22. But I haven't done that because the room it's in is not big enough. But look, we all want 4K. I want 4K. 4K sells about 19% of the physical media. But DVD is still like 57%, and then the remainder is Blu-ray. The problem is that a lot of people just don't want to invest. They don't care. Most people just want to watch something. If they can see it and hear it, it's fine. You have to be a cineast, I think, to buy into 4K and Blu-ray. But Haunted Autumn, I feel you. Again, most people, as long as they can see and hear it okay, that's where they live. I know. I prefer. I mean, I've been a fan of physical media for 43 years, so I want the best. I want the best. Give it to me, and I buy it. But it is frustrating. But don't worry. I mean, look. Okay, if you look at just this week, think about it. Just this week, Maltese Falcon 4K. Maltese Falcon. This is what dreams are made of. Midnight Run 4K from Shout Factory. Warner Brothers also putting out Cool Hand Luke, and Paramount putting out, I mean, these movies aren't the greatest, but these are the definitive versions of the Next Generation movies in 4K, in Dolby Vision UHD. So we're getting, and then, I mean, if you go any further, who would have thought, I never would have thought, you've got Second Sight, my beloved Second Sight, doing George Romero's Martin in this gorgeous 4K box set with books. I mean, this is incredible. They remastered Martin in 4K. So don't worry about the people still watching DVD. Just think about the goodness that we're getting. We live in wondrous times, people. The world might be falling apart outside, but my God, we are getting some great, great, great 4K releases. And you know what? If the world goes to hell in a handbasket, I got solar panels on the roof. I can still watch my discs. Yeah. Tom Jr. Jackson says, as of last year, Mockingbird is going to be a movie. Is that true? I hope so, because they've been talking about it. I want to know if that story is true. I did not know that. I did not know that. That is amazing. That is, of course, Tom Jr. Jackson, who coined the phrase, our motto around here is, we are all goof people. That was Tom, our moderator. Rhett Proctor says, I'll tell you, Rob, I would like a Legend of Zelda movie from Illumination in the same vein as Game of Thrones. Oh, man, that would work so well. I want to see Link versus Ganondorf on the big screen. So would I. Now, let me ask you this. Who would play Link? And would he speak? We going to get that? I thought the Chris Pratt controversy about Mario, they skated by. Can you believe you're Chris Pratt? You're now in the biggest animated film ever of all time, and you got Guardians of the Galaxy opening in a month. that guy's having a good couple of months, and so are his peeps. His agent's like, not only is his quote, and Jurassic World Dominion, Chris Pratt, man, married to Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, and your Star-Lord, and your Mario. That is some conquest of IPs, my friend. You got to give it up to that guy. But yeah, I think they're going to do that. I'd love to see a Metroid movie. Come on. That'd be badass. Doc Civil says, Rob, do you consider Darth to be a Sith title or simply Vader's first name? Oh, no, I think Darth is a Sith title. Like a Moff is a whatever, general, a statesman. Like Grand Moff, a Moff Gideon, Grand Moff Tarkin. I think Darth is absolutely a Sith title. Also, regarding Boba Fett, there was no reason to show Kid Fett. He could have just been long-lived. I think that was a big mistake. I think it was a big mistake. Skelton loves Strange New Worlds. Rob was listening to an old Stern show last night, and J.J. Abrams appeared to discuss his Trek movie. The first thing he said, he wasn't a Star Trek fan. Imagine how I was feeling. My favorite franchise I've been watching since I was a kid. And the man who gets to direct the most expensive Star Trek movie, who goes back and retcons. I mean, I know it's an alternate universe, even though I got things to say about that. Goes back and he makes a Star Trek movie, and all he said whenever he went on interview shows is he talked about how he wasn't a Star Trek fan. Imagine that. I mean, why would anybody who owns an IP have the person that made... Why would you let a guy who was not a Star Trek fan... I mean, I understand why, but he wasn't... Clearly, the wretched Star Trek 09, and it is indeed wretched. And I've said it, I'll refrain from saying right now, but I understand it's more like a Star Wars movie. It's a fun action romp. No, it's a complete bastardization of a franchise that is now 57 years old, and none of those three movies have ever made money. Despite anybody always trying to tell me, well, that movie made almost $500 million, Into Darkness. Remember, the studio only gets half that, and they have to pay for marketing. Those movies never made money. And the reason they can't make Star Trek 4 is they're too expensive, because they want to make them. If you could make look, you want to impress me, make a great Star Trek movie for $90 million or $80 million. They should never make a Star Trek movie more than $100 million because it doesn't have the audience. It's never had the audience. It's a niche franchise. But they'll do it again. Hey, they're going to make a Starfleet Academy TV series. Who's that for? The youth of America? They're not watching Star Trek. They don't even want to go to college these days. And if they do, and this is going to take, I mean, and if you read what they said about the show, it's about first loves. It's about rivalries. Dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, ch-ch. Fucking dumb. I'm telling you. Sorry. Could be good. No, it won't be. Not going to be good. The whole premise is so stupid. I mean, look, they ruined Section 31 in modern Star Trek. Section 31, one guy shows up. But now in modern Star Trek, here's Section 31 star bases. They have ships. They literally have membership cards. It's not like the CI fucking A. What a complete lack of understanding. Anyway. Simic Branislav became a new member. Welcome to the party. Our friend Dieter Bastian. Dieter Bastian says, not only did Rise of Skywalker make $1 billion, I bought this god-awful movie on Blu-ray twice. Rob, what is wrong with me? Great shirt, sir. Of course, I'm still wearing from this morning, from the Let's Get Physical Media. That was my co-host, the great Dieter Bastian. He sent me this merch. His own town, Saarbrücken, Deutschland. Apparently, Dieter was explaining to me how they had a push to sort of celebrate their city. So they made merch. I love this shirt. Dieter got it for me. It's roomy and it's soft. It's good. And of course, Dieter, I was talking to Gabe Bologna today. It looks like Tango Shalom would be playing in Germany in multiple cities in September. So I'm coming to see you, buddy. 200 Watt Studio says Splinter of the Mind's Eye is the best Star Wars sequel book. I've read it 20 times in high school before and just after Empire. It's really interesting. Splinter of the Mind's Eye, for those of you who don't know, was a sequel book that came out after Star Wars. And the thought was, and Alan Dean Foster, who ghost wrote the Star Wars novelization that's credited to George Lucas, it was thought that if Star Wars didn't make any money, they could make a cheaper sequel. And that's kind of where Splinter of the Mind's Eye came from. But it's really interesting because the Kyber crystals were introduced there. There's a lot of stuff. It's not really canonical anymore, but there's a lot of stuff in that book that has been retained in Star Wars mythology. And like you, 200 Watt Studio, I read that book a lot because, we didn't know if we were going to get another Star Wars movie. And man, I love Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and I love that it's a Macquarie painting. I think it's on the cover. I think it is, right? That first cover. Binary Sunset Media sends in a super chat and says, "God damn it, Rob. You go live, we are here." Well, what can I say? I mean, I'm going to be here a lot now. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate that support. As a matter of fact, right now there's 840 of you here. Why, thank you. I guess I would say if I was the Navi, I'd say, I see you. And apparently you see me, so thank you. It's great to have you all here. What a great Sunday night. I hope everybody had a good Easter. And by the way, if you haven't watched it yet, please stay off the internet. If you have not watched Succession, do not let anyone tell you anything about tonight's episode. I'm not going to be the one to do it, but don't read the internet if you're watching the show, and just stay off the internet until you watch tonight's Succession. You've been warned. That's all I'm saying. Jason Kremen says, "Rob, great call on the Mario Brothers opening box office. Looking forward to supporting your channel." Well, Jason, thank you. But it was John who did say, I mean, I thought it was going to be huge, of course, but it was John who did say it might be the biggest movie of the year. I don't know about that, but yeah. Jamal B. Castro says, "Hi." Oh, this is a good question. Jamal B. Castro says, "Hi, Robert. If you had the magic movie ticket from the movie The Last Action Hero, what movies would you want to go visit?" That is, well, okay. First and foremost, I'm going to say Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Only because, to be on that Enterprise, to be on the refit Enterprise, to be in the 23rd century. But movies, I would like to go into Basic Instinct and meet Catherine Trammell before she kills Johnny Boz at the beginning of the movie. Or if I can't go meet Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct, I would go into Rear Window and play the Jimmy Stewart part, because I think it's unbelievable. I just think that character that our favorite princess plays, she is so beautiful in that movie, and the way she packs her overnight bag. Come on, Grace Kelly in that movie. In that movie is like my dream girl. And plus she doesn't want to kill you with an ice pick. So she just wants to be there and love you and be in love with you. And why Jimmy Stewart did not recognize this. I mean, if I was Jimmy Stewart, Rear Window, I never would have found out that Raymond Burr killed his wife, because I would have been so enamored of Grace Kelly coming over to help me out in my infirmity. I might want to go on the boat in Apocalypse Now. Maybe. Just because that would be fun. But, of course, Star Wars. I'd want to go. Because Star Wars is a place you want to live in that universe. It'd be pretty cool. I mean, I would go into Close Encounters. I'd be Roy Neary. And I'd go into the mothership and go meet aliens. I'd love to do that. That'd be cool. So maybe there's a few. Those are just a few that came to mind. Now it's funny because now I'm like, what movies would I go to see? I don't know. 200 Watt Studio says, "I went to the Egyptian for the release of the Star Trek series soundtrack box. I was there. I recorded Gerald Fried there performing his iconic scores." I did too. I was there. As a matter of fact, one of those videos I made when he's playing part of the Paradise Syndrome, I made a video, and it's on my YouTube page. So we were in the same room, dude. That was a great night. So what he's talking about is when La La Land Records released the box set of all the music from the original Star Trek TV series, which I maintain is the greatest CD box set ever released. in the history of mankind. Gerald Fried, one of the composers, one of the famous composers of Star Trek, actually came and played. I mean, he played instruments, and it was incredible. Incredible. It was a great night. I didn't realize you were there. Alex Arlano Luna says, what do you think of the Jor-El speech at the beginning of Superman? Which, the Jor-El speech beginning, I mean, first of all, I love, you're talking about like Marlon Brando, you can't interfere with human history and all that, or is it the speech like he's giving to the council? Look, I love this beginning of Superman, the movie, if that's what you're talking about. It's the greatest thing ever, This is not fantasy. It's fucking great. And he was right. I love the beginning. The beginning of Superman, the movie, when you're on Krypton and you watch the civilization fall apart, is one of the great openings, I think, of any fantasy film ever made. And John Williams' music, I mean, you come off, I mean, it's so cool how it opens, and you see the Daily Planet in the 30s. You go past and you go into space and you see the greatest opening credits ever. The greatest opening credits until the credits for 7. It's so good. Maria Espino says, by the way, Superman Returns is better than Man of Steel. I don't know. I know I'm even in Superman Returns, and I don't know if I could. It's just different kinds of movies. I love them both for different reasons. But, I mean, if you say that, I will not try and presume to debate you. Savage Dragon says, what up, Rob? Just curious if you've ever seen the Sonic's Gate documentary here on the YouTubes. I saw it recently and now have the rage of 5 Seattleans. So for those of you, I've not seen that documentary. Now I'm gonna go rush and see it. So for those of you who might not know, Seattle, when I grew up, had a basketball team called the Seattle Supersonics. And the 78-79 season, they won the world championship. And you had downtown Freddie Brown, you had Slick Watts, you had Jack Sigma. It was a great team. Later, people like Sean Kemp were on the team. And then, I don't even know, because I had moved away, but then there was no more Seattle Supersonics. They went to somewhere else. And I didn't realize that I need to see that. I got to go watch that. Sonic's Gate. Oh, man, am I going to get mad if I watch this, Savage Dragon? I'll watch it, though. Kinky Sphincter is here. I love that name. Man of Steel is better than Superman and Superman Returns. Man of Steel is not better than Superman. I love Man of Steel, and I can understand why you say that. It's hard. I think Man of Steel, and I'm a huge Man of Steel, not apologist, but supporter. I thought Man of Steel was a great science fiction / Superman movie. And I loved seeing how catastrophic a battle between Kryptonians over an American city would be. I thought it was great. Alex, is it Ariano Luna? Because the double L, or Arellano? Ariano, is it? Great name, though. Should I read the Thrawn trilogy and Legacy of the Force books? I would read the Thrawn trilogy. I love those books. And Legacy of the Force, sure. But the Thrawn books were the first. So Star Wars had left pop culture. It's hard to believe this, but in the late 80s, after Jedi, it kind of just petered out. And the Thrawn books, along with the Dark Horse Comics, I was talking about this today earlier. They put out their Dark Empire comics. So you had Heir to the Empire and the Dark Empire. They kind of worked together, and they relaunched Star Wars into the pop culture consciousness. And the Timothy Zahn Star Wars books, they introduced Thrawn. They're pretty great, so I would say read them. Really interesting. Tommy Review says, hi, Rob, can you skip seasons 1 of 2 in Picard to watch 3? Yes. Yes, you can. Started rewatching TNG as that was my Star Trek growing up. Also wish we got a 4K of Super Mario Brothers in 93. I don't know if you'll ever get a 4K of it. You might, though. Because with the success of Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario from 93 going up the charts, maybe, just maybe, I don't know. Maybe you could. Henry K sends in a super sticker of Little Devil. I like that. Collie Woolley says, this would never happen, but if A24 was given a chance to produce a video game movie, which game would you see fit for them? For me, 2 words, Dark Souls. Ooh, that's a good choice. You know, I was going to say if it's already been done as movies, but Silent Hill was the first thing that came to my mind. But Dark Souls maybe. But I would love to see an A24 Silent Hill. And they're making the guy who made the first what's his name? The guy who made the first Silent Hill movie. Why am I drawing a blank? The French director, not Xavier Gens, but is making the new Silent Hill movie. But that's the first thing that popped into mind. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, do you agree that Mario Brothers is Bob Hoskins' best work since The Long Good Friday? No. Come on, man. It's Roger Rabbit. You know that. Everybody knows that. Guillaume Labelle says, hi, Rob, love your show. What is the first big movie disappointment that you can recall? The one that got you interested and excited and just didn't land? Oh, Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was the most disappointing movie I ever saw. I know people are going, what? But you have to understand that Star Wars changed my life. And Star Wars and Empire, I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater. I love these movies. I pored over, I had read the books, the Splinter of the Mind's Eye, even like Han Solo at Star's End and Lando Calrissian and the Mind Harp of Sharu and the Flame Wind of Ocean. But those came out, I think those came out after Jedi. I expected I thought Return of the Jedi was going to be a Godfather 2-esque Lawrence of Arabia Shakespearean tragedy. I thought it was going to be epic. I thought it was going to be the grandest, most gigantic science fiction blowout I'd ever seen. That's what I was expecting, especially on the heels of Empire. I thought that's what I thought I was going to get. And I didn't. I liked the beginning, the swashbuckling rescue of Han Solo, but it was very clear to me, even the way the movie is lit, the effects, seeing 3PO and R2 in the sand, they have to pick him up against a terrible backdrop. I mean, I watched Jedi, even the voices of the Imperial officers at the beginning don't sound right. And, everyone bags on the Ewoks, and I don't have a problem. I understand where that's coming from, but this idea as a Vietnam allegory that a under-equipped and more primitive army could fight off a more technically advanced army, I believe that. That's an interesting way to go. I just thought it was really poorly handled. I just didn't like it. And I was so disappointed. I love the throne room scene. The space battle's fine, but, once you've blown up a Death Star, a second Death Star doesn't mean shit to me. That wasn't even finished. I'm like, what? Why am I watching this? And I'll tell you something that I really hated. And people, it's hard to understand now because if you've only ever seen the special editions and things, it won't make any sense to you. But Clive Revel, who originally did the voice of the Emperor in Empire, when, what is thy bidding, my master? When the executor goes out and makes contact with the Emperor and Vader talks to the Emperor in Empire was way scary. He spoke like this. If he could be turned, he would be a valuable asset. And the Emperor's like, yes. And he was very contemplative. The Emperor in Empire was a scary motherfucker. And then when you get to Jedi, Ian McDermott's fine, but it's the Snow White witch version of the Emperor. Take your Jedi weapon, strike me down. It'll be fully operational when your friends arrive. I mean, I'm like, don't get me started. It's not that I don't hate Jedi, but it was the single most disappointing movie I've ever seen in my life. But I expected the greatest movie ever made. Honestly, I did. So, Guillaume, I hope that's okay. DL became a member, or he's still a member. And he's been a member for 22 months. Thanks, DL. Larry Quartzowitz says, hello, I just found your channel. Good question. What is your opinion of Brandon Cronenberg? I think Infinity Pool is his best, but Antiviral and Possessor are amazing too. Larry, one of my favorite directors in the world is David Cronenberg, Brandon's father. I first discovered David Cronenberg when Scanners was opening. And in Seattle, before Scanners opened at the Coliseum Theater, which isn't there anymore, they Came From Within. They showed, actually, this is not true. I want to say, the first time I saw a David Cronenberg movie, I saw They Came From Within. It was on the second bill. I went and saw Motel Hell in 1980 at a drive-in with a guy named Bud Warner. And They Came From Within was the second movie. And it blew me away. I was blown away. They Came From Within, ultra low budget, about this sex parasite that infects this apartment building. The movie's fucking great. It opens with like a naked dude cutting a naked woman, opening her up with an X-Acto knife and putting acid into her stomach. I'm like, what the hell is this? Greatest thing I ever saw. And then when Scanners opened, they showed They Came From Within, Rabid, The Brood, and then Scanners. They didn't show Fast Company, his car racing movie. And I was blown away. I took my friends. I had to go. We would always go to like movies at 13, they're R-rated movies. And we all went down there, like my friend Mark Elfendahl, I think Jennifer Epstein. And then I would go to somebody in line and go, hey, can you get me and my friends in or buy our tickets? And we went in and saw those 4 movies. It blew my mind. I'm a huge David Cronenberg fan. So when his son Brandon made Antiviral, here's the thing about Brandon. I think Brandon Cronenberg, his ideas are really interesting. Like he's following up on the whole body horror. But I think from a filmmaking standpoint, his ideas are too philosophical sometimes. Certainly I thought Infinity Pool was, which I liked. But an Antiviral, they're almost too weird. They're too literary. And there's not enough pulp horror or sci-fi in them. In my mind, probably Possessor is his best movie because I thought the plot of it and the sci-fi concept worked the best. Infinity Pool and Antiviral, which, by the way, both respectable movies. And how cool was it? We got Crimes of the Future, which, to be honest, I wanted to see that movie for 25 years and it was disappointing to me. But still, we got a David Cronenberg and a Brandon Cronenberg movie out in the same year. So that's a good year. I just feel that his movies, he hasn't yet hit the spot where his concepts and his films work, whereas Cronenberg had The Fly and Dead Ringers, which I think are both masterpieces. Surak of Vulcan says, seen Shatner in the chorus of Oedipus Rex from 1957? I don't think that I have. I don't think that I have. And I've seen a lot of Shatner stuff. That's a new one for me. Surak of Vulcan, how do you vote? Actually, that's a different character. It's Sarek of Vulcan, but Surak of Vulcan was the man who created the philosophy that was adopted by all Vulcan society. I haven't seen that. Now I want to see it. It must be on, I would assume it's on YouTube. That's very cool. The chorus of Oedipus Rex. That's crazy. Alex Arano, again, I don't know the difference. Luna comes back and says Star Wars Legends 5 or Star Wars Legends versus Star Wars Disney canon. Oh, here's what I find so strange. This is what really, so what Alex is referring to is they have all these great Star Wars Legends books. They decanonized all of them, and now they're drawing from them and making them canon again. But they're not doing it as well as the original books did. One of the great frustrating things is I've read a lot of tie-in fiction. Star Wars and Star Trek share the fact that there's a lot of great tie-in fiction. There's a lot of not so great tie-in fiction, but the people that wrote Star Wars and Star Trek novels did so because they love Star Wars and Star Trek. So there was a lot of great stuff done. And I don't know why they've never gone there. Now Star Trek Strange New Worlds is just liberally stealing from Star Trek novels, which for entire backstories for characters. And now Star Wars Legends books, the decanonized books, are being used. I just wish, look, I think the authors need to get credit. I think they need to get paid. And this excuse like, we already own the books. Okay, that's great. You already own the books. But if they were WGA writers, there's rules. It's just the right thing to do. And I understand, I'm the first person to say it's not what you deserve, it's what you negotiate. But these writers wrote these books in good faith, and now TV writers or movie writers are stealing from other authors' works and passing the work off as their own. I have a fundamental moral problem with this, and it gets me crazy. Mark Spector's Avatar. Oh my God, dude, you're spoiling. Mark Spector's Avatar has now spoiled Star Trek Picard's episodes 9 and 10. He says in the last episode of Picard, X-24 mortally wounds Picard and X-24 and Logan do battle. How'd you know that? How did you know that? Hey, for those of you who might not know, Marvel, or was it DC? No, it was Marvel. There's an X-Men Star Trek The Next Generation crossover in the comics, and there's an X-Men Star Trek The Next Generation novel. So you can read the comics and the novel. So Mark Spector just spilled the end of Picard season 3 for everybody. You should be embarrassing. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, Shaw doesn't just call her Commander, he calls her Commander 7, right? Well, yeah, he's disdainful of her because she's a Borg and he probably got saddled with her. But I would just say, stay tuned. That storyline is not done yet. RRTNZ says, Hail, Bob, would you do a stream with Mr. Brown Alliance? The Drinker was on today, Chatto last week. Brown has a cool balance of US and UK guests. Sure, do I know Mr. Brown Alliance? I would, of course. I love going on other people's YouTube channels. It's something I wasn't doing for a while, and now I really like that. Tom Jr. Jackson says, I sent the article to your Twitter DM. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. I will look. Alex Frazier says, thoughts on Jurassic Park, my favorite movie ever. I love Jurassic Park. You know what? When I first saw Jurassic Park, I mean, it like Jaws. It's changed from the book, but what a great popcorn muncher of a movie. And I have to tell you, man, when you first see, when Sam Neill stands up and the whole, that's one of the great moments in cinema history. I mean, as somebody who grew up watching, stop motion dinosaurs like the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or Valley of the Gwangi, to see photorealistic dinosaurs in that movie and the way Spielberg always shot the dinosaurs from people's points of view, so they loomed large. It was incredible. It was incredible. When I saw Jurassic Park, by the way, that movie's 30 years old this year. It was a jaw-dropping movie. It was incredible. And hearing John Williams' score, it was great. When the helicopter's landing on Isla Nublar, dun 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 dun. How can you not? So great. It's great. It's great. Gritter Plays sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, I want to do a Zelda movie, a violent PG-13 live action or anime. Plus, I need Link to say, well, excuse me, princess, at least once. That line is a nod to the old school cartoon. But here's the question. Who plays Link? Who plays Link? I don't know. People get pissed. Maria Espino says, Succession is so fucking good. It's so good. I love it. I do love it. You got to love it. I mean, what, right? Don't you? It's great stuff. So it is. It is so fucking good. Mashby says, Rob, you are a wonderful treat to watch daily. Thank you. Well, Mashby, I appreciate that. Tomorrow, by the way, I'm on the channel with the Popcast guys, and we have the actor that plays Moriarty, who was also in Hunt for Red October. And that show is going to be on at 2 o'clock Pacific time. So we're talking more Star Trek, which is amazing. But thank you. I very much appreciate that, Mashby. That's very nice of you to say. Adam Van Gessen says, Terry Metalis liked my tweet today, then Stashwick responded. First time anything like that happened. Fanboy heart is gushing. Hashtag Star Trek Legacy. Adam, one of the great things about, first of all, Todd Stashwick, one of the great dudes of all time. Total nerd, genuine. He has a background from Second City in Chicago. He's just a great guy. And Terry Metalis is one of the nicest and most talented people I've met in the industry. So the two of them. And by the way, if you have not watched, if you're liking what you're seeing on Picard Season 3, I cannot recommend 12 Monkeys enough. The series they did, the 4 seasons. Wow, what a tightly constructed drum of a time travel story. Great, great, great stuff. You got to love that. And the fact that they do respond, how cool is that? They don't have to, but they do. Mickey O says, could listen to you talk about pretty much anything. Which comic book movie this year will make the most money? Well, only because we've been hearing about it for a long time. I think The Flash. I think The Flash, if it's as good, I've been hearing how good it is, despite anything to do with Ezra Miller. I've only heard that The Flash is great. People have been talking about it for a long time, and I'm curious to see what the fuss is all about. I would have said Aquaman, but, I've heard some questionable things about Aquaman. But if Guardians is a banger, but I do think Flash might take it. I think so. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, "Hey, Rob, I apologize if this question seems personal. People are somehow convinced you and John Campea hate each other now. I'm personally not a Campea fan, but I hate it when misinformation spreads. I don't know why anybody would think that I would hate John Campea. John Campea has only ever been nice to me. I mean, when the blow up happened at the Schmodown, or after I wasn't on Collider anymore after John Schnepp's death because of shenanigans that really had nothing to do with me, but I was definitely caught in the fallout of that ridiculousness. It was John who reached out to me and said, come do the Weekly Hero with me. That was back in 2018. I met John for the first time 8 years ago this month. I was on the 6th episode of Collider Heroes. It was AMC Heroes. And John Schnepp, who I had known for years, asked me to come on the show. And that's the first time I met John Campea. John Campea has always been good to me. When I was working on various things and I couldn't get, when it took me, like when he would want me to do a mailbag, he would want it done right away. And sometimes I didn't do it for a couple days. And that was only because I was working on whether it was Tango Shalom or whether it was Dota Dragon's Blood. I mean, he would get mad at me. Don't get me wrong. I was being flaky, and he should get mad at me. But he was right. And John has been nothing but good to me, and he's sponsoring the channel now, and we're going to CinemaCon. I mean, there's no reason to hate John Campea for wanting to change things on his show. I get it. John too has, remember, going through a lot of stuff. There's crazy inflation happening. There's all kinds of things. So I don't bear John Campea any ill will. We worked together for 8 years. And we're having a good time. I mean, the only thing that I regret about all of this is I thought he'd put together a great team. I don't think I've ever had more fun in my life than getting into that room when Chris and I were sitting at one table, John was sitting at the other table. We had Jonathan Voico, Ray Ora, and Taylor Gonzalez, and we were all working together. It was so much fun going into work. I love that. I mean, I will miss that. I do miss that because John has a knack for finding talented people. And we had a lot of fun. But I can understand the team of people was sort of in a way taking away from John's core mission statement, which is, being the John Campea show. And I think that, he wanted, I think the show might have been sort of getting away from him, maybe. And I regret, I thought we were doing great. I thought the show did great in 2022, with all the sponsorships, everybody was liking the show. I think we were having a great time. That's what I regret. But, John's been very good to me. And I'll tell you something, he as an employer, he would always pay me on time. He treated me well. And I have nothing bad to say about the 8 years I've been streaming with John, and we're going to continue. I can't wait to go to CinemaCon and sit next to him and watch The Flash. We have a great time at CinemaCon, and I can't wait. I can't wait to go back. I'm going with them as well. It's going to be great. So, yeah, here's what I do feel. I do feel that John has been treated unfairly by a lot of the YouTube community. And look, I understand that, and I think, one of the things that I've streamed with a lot more people. Like John doesn't stream with any other YouTubers, so I do. So there's a lot of people that have, and I've been so flattered and so touched by the outpouring of support that I've received from people. And even right now, people are watching the channel. People are subscribing to the channel. What I find fascinating is there have been people that are writing me that's I didn't know you had a YouTube channel. I'm like, this is the 843rd episode of Robservations I've done. Whether we were doing, Elizabeth and I did whining about movies, which we're going to start again. We did 150 shows of that. It's wild to me that people that watched the John Campea show didn't know I had a channel. So it's great to have people come. I can't believe that so many people have come to support, which is amazing. It's amazing, and I can't thank. It's so nice. So it's great. Dorino one is Dorino one. You're awesome, and my real name is Robert. So here's money. Well, thank you, thank you very much. Poot Shoot Riot became a member of the channel. Well, thank you, Poot Shoot Riot, for becoming a member. Colonel Sanders says, when Kathleen Kennedy departs, the memes will be glorious. Insert thunderous applause. One way out. This is where the fun begins. Rob, you got any off the top? Let's see. When Kathleen Kennedy leaves, listen, I'm a big Kathleen Kennedy fan. The woman produced a lot of my childhood. But I would say death mark's not an easy thing to live with. That's General Reichian in Empire. That's the first thing off the top. Greet Pack 9 says, hey, Rob, just sending love and support, and thank you for all your sweat. I need to sweat some more, get back in shape. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, I was sitting in the mezzanine of the Egyptian. So was I. So was I, if you remember. That's where I was sitting. And it was great. Thomas Logan, my man Thomas, you got to get a package this week, dude. If Sebastian Stan is announced as the star of Filoni's Star Wars film, playing Luke Skywalker, does Star Wars brand achieve critical mass again? That's a good question. I think he would be a great Luke Skywalker. Playing an older Skywalker, but younger than Luke is now. Hell yeah. I think that would be a huge move. I think that would be something that they should totally do. I don't know if they'll do it. But, I mean, I honestly don't know. I have no idea. Would they? I can't. I have a problem watching, like, it's one thing to see people digitally de-age when they're also playing themselves in other ages in a movie, but to see digital recreations of people in live action movies, I don't know if that's a good thing. You know, it bothers me. I don't buy it. I don't like it. I don't know. But if Sebastian Stan plays Luke, then it works. Poot Shoot Riot. Do you think we'll ever see Abeloth in a Star Wars flick? It's a chick. She drank from the something. She's like the power. I don't know much about her. She drank. She's a powerful Force user, right? I'd have to look into that, but I don't know. I'm surprised we're getting as many people as we're getting in Ahsoka. So everything is possible. I mean, seeing Cad Bane in The Mandalorian, all this stuff, I think it's great. But yeah, nothing is off the plate. I think we can say, I don't know what we're going to get, but we're probably going to get, they're going to get to everybody, I guess. Cool Tubification says, man, I just watched episode 8 of Picard, Surrender, and I actually cried. What an incredible episode and season. You know what? It is incredible. The whole data and lore scene, that got me. I've welled up multiple times during this show. And to me, that's doing something right. Joel Morford says, are you a fan of the Dick Tracy movie? Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy movie? I am. For those of you, early on, I want to say, was it 1990? Was Dick Tracy 90? Warren Beatty's, it was his passion project. I mean, it's got everybody in the world. The makeup effects are cool. They shot it to look like a comic book with the vibrant colors. Madonna plays Breathless Mahoney. I like Dick Tracy. I have it on Blu-ray. I think it holds up well too. I think because it's an interesting vision that he succeeded. I don't know if the narrative works as good as it could have, but I like the film. I think Warren Beatty really succeeded in doing what he set out to do. Matt Mobile says, meanwhile, do you have a favorite Jackie Chan film? Mine's got to be Drunken Master 2 or Rumble in the Bronx. Both of those are great. Probably Police Story, the Police Story saga, but Drunken Master 2 and Rumble in the Bronx are great. or Super Cop. Super Cop. I'm just trying to think. It's the names. I always get the names mixed up because of the differences in the versions. But yeah, I think is it Police Story 2 or Super Cop 2? I should look. But Drunken Master, Rumble in the Bronx, any of them. Yeah. Tommy's Reviews says, if you could see another version of a movie, which one would you want to see? Mine is Cameron's Jurassic Park, as he wanted it to be horror, similar to the novel. That's a good one. Another version of a movie. You know what? I would love to have seen George Miller, who made Fury Road and Road Warrior, direct a Star Wars movie. I would love to have seen after Road Warrior, which came out, it came out in America in 82, but 81 in Australia. I would love to have seen George Miller direct Return of the Jedi. I would like to have seen that. That would have been cool. 200 Watt Studio says, I was 20 in 1983 and saw Return of the Jedi opening night. I was so disappointed. The editing seemed so choppy and the transitions were bad, and I hated the Muppets and the Ewoks. I was 16, and I'm right there with you. I didn't understand the creature designs. I'm like, they had all these great creature designs, and I'm looking at these Cy Snoodles and the Rebo Band. They look like animated characters put into live action. They didn't look like, the physics didn't work, and the same sensibility, that was totally George Lucas's sensibility. You saw it repeated in The Phantom Menace. People like Sebulba and Ben Quadinaros and all that. It was just, I didn't believe those characters. They looked animated, and it was a bummer. DL says, damn right, I've been with you for 22. You're the man. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, DL. Matt Mobile says, I'm lighting up a Fatty J for you, Rob. Are they dank? Is your Fatty J full of dank nugs, the dankest of nugs? I thank you for that. If you're willing to blaze up for me, I take that as a badge of honor. Wesley Namila says, Rob, I personally sent Emma Stone your way. She's ready for you to make a film. I have unique connections with her. Emma knows about you, and we will be in contact very soon. Wesley, I thank you for that. I don't know what I would do. I have a massive crush on Emma Stone, but she got married. But I love her as an actress. I think Emma Stone's incredibly talented. I'd love to make a movie with her. I don't know why she would call me, but I've actually got a movie I want to make that she wouldn't have to be in it very long, but if I could get her to be in it, I could get the money to make it. 200 Watt Studio says Motel Hell starring Rory Calhoun is an essential film I love, and it's got Grossman from Chips getting in a chainsaw fight. I love Motel Hell, and I can't wait to get it in 4K. George the Giant Slayer. George, how are you, man? We got to talk tomorrow. Love Cronenberg, The History of Violence, Eastern Promises, and The Dead Zone. What do you think? What did you think of Cosmopolis with Pattinson? All hail, Robert. Love the show. Cosmopolis is okay. I don't think it's one of his strongest movies, but I liked it. I like Cosmopolis. I thought it was cool that he branched out into that arena, and I like seeing it. He's done a lot of really, I love Map to the Stars, but Cosmopolis is great, and I thought Pattinson was great in it. But I don't think it's top tier Cronenberg. But it's still, it's still definitely worth seeing. Guillaume Lebel comes back and says, thoughts on The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers. Look, Robert Eggers, the guy is one of my favorite of the new breed of filmmakers. I loved The Witch. I think it was masterfully made. And I thought The Lighthouse, when I saw The Lighthouse, I was blown away by the craft and the acting. I mean, obviously, it's not as deliciously fun as I would have liked, and it didn't enchant me the way The Witch did in terms of but in terms of evoking mood and theme, and it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible. Robert Eggers is an incredible filmmaker, and The Northman fucking rules, and he's incredible. He's one of my favorite new filmmakers. He's one of the people I will run out and see whatever he makes. Irene Jobson says that movie from 1990s Popcorn, the horror movie Popcorn. I like Popcorn. I saw that movie. I want to say I saw that movie in Hollywood, or I might have seen that at an Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. screening on a Sunday at USC in the theater there, in the Norris Theater. Popcorn, because I can see the movie poster with the girl eating the popcorn. I like popcorn, but I saw it once. I've never seen that movie again. I don't own it. Blackjack Hooligan, who's a member of the channel, says, I've worked my way through the TOS cast Star Trek films, and I've loved every one. Have to say I'm impressed at the quality of even the weaker ones in the series. Well, again, because the characters, even Star Trek V, which is a little creaky, you love the character work in those movies. And they're so much fun, and the characters, they're so endearing. You gotta love it. Arwix123 says, thoughts on the new X-Men by Grant Morrison. I was going to say, is he doing another run? I've got the hardcover right over there. When he came up with Cassandra Nova and all that, I loved Grant Morrison's X-Men run. I thought it was unbelievable. Grant Morrison's X-Men run and Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run were the shot in the arms the X-Men comic franchise needed. And Grant Morrison's X-Men run, I remember it was so crazy to think that Xavier was in the womb with a twin. And I was like, man, I love that. I love the new X-Men run. It's great. It's great. Matt Mobile says, any thoughts on the Andy Sedaris movies? They need to make some movies like that again. Andy Sedaris made a lot of, B movies, and they had action, and they had nudity, and they were always playing on late night cable. I don't know if there's a place for those movies now. Like, I've often lamented the fact that there's no more erotic. I mean, now we're getting the Fatal Attraction series. There's another series coming called Obsession. We don't have erotic thrillers anymore. And I don't know why. I loved erotic thrillers, and I love, like, Andy Sedaris, all those guys that were making those kinds of movies. We don't have that anymore. I mean, it's so weird that on one hand, you've got girls with OnlyFans accounts, and nobody's making movies like Andy Sedaris movies. I don't understand that. I maybe because Andy Sedaris is making movies from the male gaze, which is what OnlyFans is all about, but it's also supposed to be empowering. I don't understand the modern age. I miss late night cable flicks. We got to get back to that. Maybe that's a niche I can start to fill. I don't know. Six Scale Mafia says, amidst some tech difficulties, we had such a good conversation last night. I can't believe we went 3 hours. That was amazing. Thanks again for sharing, too. I noticed lots of people last night. Well, Six Scale Mafia and I, Six Scale Mafia actually, you know what? I'm jealous of Six Scale Mafia. You know why? Okay, I've gotten credits on, like, Army of Darkness. I was a producer on Agent Cody Banks. You know what I don't have? I'll tell you what I don't have. What I don't have, and let me see if is it on the. So, here is an X06 action figure of Chakotay. It's brand new. You know what Six Scale Mafia has? He has a credit as the videographer. The man has a credit on a 6-scale action figure. How can I get a credit on a 6-scale action figure? I didn't even know I wanted a credit on a 6-scale action figure until Six Scale Mafia got one. And I'm like, now I have a new dream in life. That's what I want. On a Star Trek figure to boot. I mean, talk about dreams coming true, Anthony. Come on, man. That's cool. That's some cool shit, son. But it was a great conversation. Everybody should subscribe to Six Scale Mafia. Craig Hurst says, hello, Rob. I always thought you were right on your theory that the MCU is currently operating in multiple universes. How do you see them wrapping this mistake of a multiverse finishing? I don't know. I really think that they still have time between Secret Invasion and Captain America New World Order, which I'm really excited about Captain America New World Order. I think that if they have to make a big course correction, and Bob Iger, they need to pull the Marvel Universe, they need to ground it again. The multiverse is too much. It's pushed the boundaries of the MCU too far. Thor Love and Thunder and Quantum Mania are not the direction. I've read the scripts for Secret Invasion. I can't wait to see Secret Invasion. I cannot wait. I hope it's as good as the scripts because it's really good. Now, I think Secret Invasion could lead into something like New World Order in a really interesting way. I just think the multiverse thing is not working for the MCU. I understand why they went that direction. I just don't think it works. And I don't know if they're going to change it. We're going to see. It depends how these new movies play out, really. Tommy Reviews says, I'd love to see George Miller's Justice League. Yeah, so do I. I mean, he was going to make it. Justice League Mortal. And the script was pretty good. I have the script somewhere. Really interesting that he was going to do it. But, yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. 200 Watt Studio says, Data Lore poker scene was so smart and respected the audience's intelligence. Spiner switched between Data and Lore as Chris Reeve with Clark and Soups. People can say, everyone will tell you who worked on Picard Season 3 that he can do that on a dime, on a moment's notice. He can just do it in the middle of a sentence. He's great in those roles. He's just fantastic. Oh, Horror Binger says, Rob, you need to post links to your YouTube guest appearances. I can't keep up with all of them. Missed the Zod one last week. Long live horror physical media. Yeah, I should. Sometimes I don't even know that I'm going to do them, but I will. I'll start making a list. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, tell me the reason the Titan only fires torpedoes is because the Enterprise D that maybe in episode 9 or 10 fires classic phasers. Well, I can't tell you that. As a matter of fact, I saw a video. It was a leaked video of what's actually in Bay 12, and it was on like Reddit, and it got pulled down. So I was like, wow, okay, but I can't tell you that. So there you go. And I think, hang on. So everyone, let's put a moratorium on Super Chats. Let me get these last tips because I can't speak anymore. Brian Osborne said, oh, he already asked me that question. Anonymous said, oh, I already did that. And Darth Plato. Julian Stewart says, Rob, production coordinator here again. Yes, I remember the original Mario script very well. It was fantastic, and Hopper and Hoskins were furious it got nixed. Of the people you mentioned, the most important was Jake Eberts. He was the money guy, not Jaffe. One day, I'll give you the detail. Yeah, that makes sense. Roland Jaffe was just the front man, but yeah, Jake Eberts, yes, that makes a lot of sense. I would love to hear your stories. I would love to talk about that. Jermaine King says, Lucille Ball saving Star Trek was the beginning of Rob's love of redheads. Well, Star Trek certainly was. That might very well have been true, sir. Jermaine King, you never know. I still love my redheads. Stubble McShave says, really looking forward to Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. His sensibilities and ability to create interesting moods are perfect for that type of movie. I totally agree. Robert Eggers is the master of mood. I mean, that's why I love The Witch. So yeah. Let's see. Christopher Cafe says, favorite documentary, The King of Kong, Fistful of Quarters. That's a great documentary for those. And that guy's, he's like, continues to be a tool. He continues to be a tool. I mean, he keeps getting his records erased. Thomas Logan says, I'm a huge fan of Daniel Davis. So Daniel Davis is the actor that portrayed Moriarty, and he's going to be on the Popcast tomorrow. We're going to be interviewing him. Tomorrow, you must ask him about Christopher Nolan, The Prestige, Michael Caine, David Bowie, Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, and Andy Serkis. If it's live, I'll be there firing in Super Chats. It is live. It's live at 2 o'clock. So join us on the Popcast. Arwix1233 says, just got Superman Blue, Volume 1. Thoughts? Okay, Superman Blue, the Electric Superman. You know what? It's a little goofy, but I'm not going to lie. I kind of always liked that suit, the blue version. I liked it, but it was goofy. Is that an omnibus? Because I would get that omnibus. Is it a hardcover? 200 Watt Studio says, you will finish when the sun rises. No, I have to stop. And I'm going to stop. Wesley Namila says, Rob, I just met Sam Raimi last Saturday at MegaCon 23. I asked him if he was doing any projects in Atlanta. I told him I was a film student making independent short films and I'd love to work with him. He said, let's do it. Look, man, I love Sam Raimi. He's great. The first time I actually met him before Army of Darkness was on the set, or was on the back lot of Warner Brothers when he was scoring Darkman. And he took me I met him because he knew Lisa Henson, and he took me onto the set, onto the scoring stage. I watched a little bit of Darkman being scored and met Danny Elfman. So that was amazing. Well, listen, everyone, that is it. I'm ending this. Craig Hurst throws in a super chat and says, thanks for responding, Rob. You're great at what you do, and I'm proud to be a member. What do you see as a way to bring Steve Rogers back, if not in New World Order? Well, Steve Rogers isn't dead. You know, he's still out there. He's old man Steve Rogers, but I think that he should come back in some kind of a mentor capacity. Young Steve Rogers, don't know about that yet. Certainly if they do Secret Wars or Kang Dynasty or something, you could have a different, time frame Steve Rogers. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. But Craig, thank you for the kind thoughts. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle souls, kind souls, gentle beings, all of you from around the 28 known galaxies, I am ending this stream, but Wesley Namila fires in another super chat and says, Rob, is this real life? I took your advice. I listened to the Sam Raimi story, and now he wants to work. You rock, Rob. Well, just be cool about it. If that's true, and he's interested in looking in something, the key is to be cool and to realize, always take it as a gift. Don't push people. And if you do have some kind of a connection, hey, that could be great. Sean Hoover says, hey, good night, Rob. See you later, bud. I will see you later. I want to thank everybody for being so generous supporting this channel via super chats and tips and memberships, which is amazing. Thanks for everybody that has subscribed to this channel. There's a lot more stuff coming. I'm hoping that I'm going to get my first episode of my new show, my pre-recorded shows that are called RMBs 10 in 20, which are shows, 20-minute shows where I'm going to go through things and give you a list of 10 things, not definitive, but things that I like that give you an overview of franchises. I'm going to start with the original series. So Star Trek Season 1, 10 episodes you need to watch to understand Star Trek, because everyone has been telling me or asking me, Rob, there's so much Star Trek, I don't even know where to begin. So I'm going to start with Star Trek and at least first do the first 3 seasons of the original series, then go on to Next Generation. And people have asked me to do a lot of pre-recorded stuff, which I haven't really done. It's mostly been live stuff. So now these are going to be designed from the ground up. I'm going to edit them, pre-recorded stuff, and they're going to be called RMBs 10 and 20, TEN in :20. So 10 things in 20 minutes. And look out for that hopefully this week. Next Saturday night, Architects of Imagination, a video game developers podcast, drops with DJ, who's going to be a new host on this channel. You'll see him. And he interviews Eben Cook from Naughty Dog. And it's really interesting. That drops next Saturday. And then, of course, I'll be doing Robservations all week. We are doing our Curlin Naskos after show for episode 9 of Picard on Thursday. And, of course, Otaku Experience drops Thursday. Is coming back from Star Wars Celebration in London. Lael Rockwell, both Lael Rockwell and were there. That's why I couldn't do a show on Friday with them, but I can't wait to do one on Friday this week to hear about everything they saw and experienced at Star Wars Celebration. So thank you, everybody. It's been great. What a great show tonight. A lot of people were here. Can't thank you enough. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better night.